Chapter 1551. This is the earth vein of the 9 dragons. Looking at the 9 shining dragons in the valley, Nietion's pupils couldn't help but tremble, and his eyes became slightly glazed. The 9 dragons were formed by the runes of the ancient Ming language. Although Nietion couldn't understand these runes, he could feel a terrifying momentum. It was as if this momentum was affecting the entire god's domain. Once it was destroyed, the entire god's domain would be destroyed. At the place where the 9 dragons converged, even more intense runes condensed together, forming a dazzling ball of light that rotated rapidly. Nietion's eyebrows furrowed. He didn't know what the ball of light represented. 9 dragons converge, Mother Earth appears. Could this be? At this moment, Fat Cat's strange voice rang out again. His voice was thin and trembling. Obviously, he was extremely surprised. Nietion was stunned again. He didn't know why Fat Cat was so surprised. Everyone else was also stunned, their faces blank. Although they couldn't understand what the map represented, that kind of force was something that everyone could clearly feel. Let's go. At this moment, one of the Scarlet Moon guards reacted and exclaimed in shock. Immediately after, his figure dashed into the distance. When the others saw this, they all moved and left as well. Nietion frowned. He had a helpless look on his face. At this moment, even if he wanted to stop these people, he didn't have the strength. Without the Star River Forbidden Flight, he couldn't stop so many people at the same time. It was good that these people were scared away. At least, they wouldn't be a threat to Nietion and the others. In fact, Nietion wasn't in a good state. He had consumed a lot of the power of the stars and couldn't activate the Star River Forbidden Flight again. Without the Star River Forbidden Flight, it would be very difficult for him and Chen Wuqing to fight against more than a dozen mid-stage or late-stage mid-god experts. If these people were calm enough and fought with Nietion and Chen Wuqing to the death, the outcome was uncertain. Fat, are you okay? Nietion retracted his aura and flashed into the valley. Seeing that Fat Cat was still in a daze, he couldn't help but frown and ask. The Fat Cat's eyes were blurred, staring at the 9 dragons pattern in a daze. Hearing Nietion's voice, the Fat Cat came back to its senses. It waved its paw and said, "I'm fine. The Chi-Yu guards have escaped, let's leave quickly." Nietion frowned and prepared to leave immediately. After those guards escaped, it wouldn't be long before a large number of experts from the Crimson Moon Divine Palace would arrive. If Qi Yifeng was here, she would probably come personally. Although Nietion possessed early-stage mid-god strength, there was still a huge gap between him and an overgod like Qi Yifeng. There was no way he could contend against an overgod. "We can't leave yet." The Fat Cat's eyes darkened as it growled. Immediately after, a glass-like chi gushed out from its fat body, gushing into the 9 dragons diagram, slowly imprinting the 9 dragons diagram onto the geomancy diagram. It was impossible for the geomancy diagram to remain open all the time. Therefore, the Fat Cat had to move the 9 dragons geographical vein into the geomancy diagram. Nietion immediately understood that this was similar to his holographic divine glyph inscription. Only by moving the 9 dragons geographical vein into the geomancy diagram could the 9 dragons geographical vein be considered as the real 9 dragons geographical vein. What exactly is the 9 dragons geographical vein? Why is the Fat Cat so interested in it? Murmured Nietion in his heart. He could only watch from the side, unable to help. The Fat Cat's movements were very fast, but moving the 9 dragons geographical vein into the geomancy diagram was clearly not an easy task. After a short while, beads of sweat appeared on the Fat Cat's forehead and its face turned pale. The others could only watch from the side anxiously but could do nothing to help. After a long time, under the hard work of the Fat Cat, the 9 dragons geographical vein was finally imprinted onto the geomancy diagram. Success! The Fat Cat was sweating profusely and his face was pale, but his eyes shone with a strange light. He was very happy. Nia Tian, keep the geomancy diagram well. The fat cat moved and returned to the origin fetus space. He was very weak now. Fat, what exactly is the Nine Dragons geographical vein? Nia Tian held the geomancy diagram in his palm and frowned, puzzled. The Nine Dragons geographical vein is a good thing. As long as we find one of the geographical veins and absorb its energy, your strength will soar. The fat cat lay in the sea of demons and gods, smiling proudly. At this time, the split in his tail was even more obvious, as if he could grow a second tail very soon. Even before the awakening, the 3,000 demons and gods' strength still contained a very strong life force. Fat, I saw a blazing white ball of light where the 9 dragons converged. What is that ball of light? It seems to be more powerful than the 9 dragons geographical vein? Nia Tian frowned and couldn't help but voice out the doubt in his heart. I'm not very sure what that ball of light is. When the fat cat heard Nia Tian ask about that ball of light, his face turned solemn and he said solemnly, "But I have a guess in my heart. That ball of light is very likely the legendary Mother Earth." Mother Earth. Almost as soon as the fat cat's voice fell, Sakra's exclamation rang out. His voice was very sharp and it was obvious that he was very surprised. Mother Earth? Nia Tian was stunned. He didn't know what Mother Earth was, but something that could make Fat Cat and Sakra so surprised was definitely not ordinary. Mother Earth is closely related to the legendary veins of the Earth. It's a kind of source energy. If your devil vitality can fuse with Mother Earth, your strength will rise to the supreme realm soon. Fat Cat smiled faintly and said solemnly, "Origin power." Nia Tian went blank for a moment, taken aback. No wonder the fat cat and Sakra were so shocked. So Mother Earth was the legendary source energy. Nia Tian, let's leave quickly. It's no longer safe here. Fat Cat saw Nia Tian stunned and couldn't help but remind him. All right. Nia Tian nodded solemnly. Now wasn't the time to discuss in detail. They had to leave immediately. If the people from Red Moon Divine Palace came, it would be troublesome. Let's go. Nia Tian shouted and was the first to rush out of the valley. Everyone rushed out of the valley and shuttled through the forest agilely. Nia Tian didn't dare to fly in the sky as it would be too big of a target. After a moment, everyone came to the periphery of Red Moon Mountain Range and was about to leave. But at this moment, a deafening roar came from the sky. Nia Tian, since you have returned to Red Moon Divine Palace, then stay. Boom. As the sound of thunder landed, a violent air wave came crashing down from the sky like a collapsing mountain, blocking Nia Tian and the rest. Nia Tian was forced to stop and his face darkened. He raised his head to look at the sky and saw a tyrannical figure standing in the sky, releasing a strong killing aura. Chapter 1552. On the outskirts of the Scarlet Lunar Mountain Range. Nia Tian couldn't help but frown as he looked at the man in the sky. The newcomer was the commander of the Crimson Lunar Divine Palace. He was even stronger than Wang Lin, a mid-stage high god. Such strength was enough to make him a top-notch expert in the God Awakening territory. After all, the God Awakening territory was a low-level domain. Anyone with the strength of an overgod was already a top-notch expert. Nia Tian, I am Zhao Lei. You have already returned to the Crimson Lunar Divine Palace. Why are you in such a hurry to leave? Zhao Lei said in a thunderous voice. As soon as he finished speaking, thunder rumbled behind him, releasing a powerful threat. Commander Zhao, Nia Tian smiled and stepped forward. I have matters to attend to. I can't stay for long. Can't stay? Zhao Lei smiled coldly. Then, his face darkened and he said, What if I insist that you stay? As he spoke, the threat in Zhao Lei's tone was extremely strong. Can you stop me? Nia Tian's eyes narrowed. He took a step forward and soared into the sky. His aura erupted. He didn't want to get entangled with Zhao Lei. If the others from the Crimson Lunar Divine Palace arrived, the situation would be even worse. However, Nie Tian wasn't in his best condition. The battle with Wang Lin had consumed too much of his power of the stars. He couldn't use the starry sky restriction. If Nie Tian was in his best condition, he might be able to fight Zhao Lei with the starry sky restriction. But now it was too much for him. Nie Tian, you are too arrogant, Zhao Lei frowned. His eyes flashed with murderous intent. He knew that Nie Tian killed Wang Lin, but he felt that it must have been an accident. Wang Lin was careless and fell into Nie Tian's trap. Based on his understanding of the martial way, it was impossible for an early-stage mid-god to kill a high-god martial artist. Moreover, Zhao Lei believed that his strength was far above Wang Lin's, so he didn't take Nie Tian seriously. Nie Tian, I will give you one last chance. Come back with me obediently. Otherwise, don't blame me for being merciless, Zhao Lei said coldly. Dream on. Nie Tianling roared. Astral soul wings appeared behind his back as he directly pierced out with the heaven slash of the sword of absolute slash. It was a simple sword strike, yet it was accompanied by a resolute killing intent. Facing an expert like Zhao Lei, Nie Tian could only take the initiative and attack with all his might. If he took the initiative, he might have a chance. You don't know how to appreciate favors. When Zhao Lei saw that Nie Tian had actually taken the initiative to attack, he couldn't help but become enraged. With a deep roar, he slammed his palm down. Suddenly, tens of thousands of lightning bolts appeared in the sky, connecting into a net of lightning that crazily pressed down on Nie Tian. Boom! An explosive sound rang out as the sword's shadow was directly torn apart by the lightning net. Sword intent gushed out in all directions as the boundless power of lightning pressed down ferociously, causing even the heavens and earth to tremble. Nie Tian's face darkened, and the wings on his back vibrated. Although his reaction was extremely fast, he was still struck by the lightning net. His body trembled, and he was blasted flying, leaving behind a trail of blood in the air. Nie Tian. Upon seeing this, Chen Wuqing's figure suddenly dashed forward with the dark dust spear in his hand. The spear was like a dragon, and countless spear shadows danced wildly in the air, bombarding down on Zhao Lei. Little ant, you're courting death. Zhao Lei shouted coldly and slammed his palm again. The sound of thunder resounded in the air. Ah! The next moment, Chen Wuqing let out a blood-curdling scream as his figure directly fell to the ground. At the critical moment, Nie Qiu reacted quickly and caught Chen Wuqing. Chen Wuqing's strength was not weak, but when faced with an expert that was a realm higher than him, he appeared to be unable to withstand a single blow. Zhao Lei did not use his full strength in this palm, otherwise, Chen Wuqing would have been killed on the spot. Nie Tian stabilized his figure. When he saw that Chen Wuqing was injured, his eyes trembled, and his killing intent surged. Nie Tian, return with me. Zhao Lei could not help but tremble when he felt Nie Tian's berserk fighting intent. He did not expect that an early-stage mid-god martial artist could actually unleash such a powerful fighting intent when facing a mid-stage high-god martial artist. At this moment, Zhao Lei felt that Nie Tian was an opponent worthy of respect. Is that possible? Nie Tianling laughed. Then, the 9 dragon veins in his body began to revolve crazily. A sea of golden lightning appeared behind him, and endless dragon aura spread out, enveloping the space within 10,000 meters. Under the influence of the dragon aura, even the space started to tremble. Zhao Lei's eyebrows sank when he saw this. He said in surprise, "What a powerful lightning energy!" He was a lightning attribute martial artist and had a deep understanding of the lightning energy. However, among all the lightning energy he had seen, there was no energy stronger than Nie Tian's. Where does your lightning energy come from? Zhao Lei calmed down and asked. He knew that Nie Tian was not a lightning attribute martial artist. How could his body release such a powerful lightning energy? That's none of your business. Nie Tianling replied coldly. You're courting death. Zhao Lei's eyebrows sank. His eyes were filled with intense killing intent and desire. He could feel that if he were to fuse with Nie Tian's lightning energy, his strength would be greatly enhanced. You think you can covet my power of lightning with just you? Dream on. How could Nie Tian not know what Zhao Lei was thinking? He let out a cold roar and blurred into motion. Behind him, an enormous golden dragon that was 3,000 to 4,000 meters long appeared in the sea of lightning. It was wreathed in raging dragon aura and lightning power. At the same time, the terrifying primal chaos flame was burning around it. So powerful! Zhao Lei's eyes widened when he saw this. He felt a trace of danger. Nie Tian, Chen Wuqing, Yang Zhongqiu, and the others were also dumbfounded. Chen Wuqing, in particular, was petrified. Previously, he had thought that even if he wasn't as strong as Nie Tian, he wouldn't be much weaker than him at all. But as Nie Tian revealed more and more trump cards and his combat strength grew stronger, Chen Wuqing realized the gap between him and Nie Tian. At this moment, when Chen Wuqing saw the golden dragon beneath Nie Tian's feet, he no longer wanted to compete with Nie Tian. Zhao Lei, I'll give you a chance as well. Get the hell out of here! Nie Tian blurred into motion, his eyes filled with killing intent as he roared. Nie Tian, you are too arrogant. Zhao Lei furrowed his brows and let out a low roar. The aura behind him erupted like a volcano. The aura was majestic and terrifying. He was a mighty mid-stage high god. How could he be scared off by a mid-stage high god? More importantly, he wanted Nie Tian's lightning energy. In that case, don't blame me for what I'm about to do. Nie Tian's voice was deep and low. His voice was filled with intense killing intent. Then, he moved. The golden dragon beneath his feet rolled out. The momentum of heaven and earth was forcefully changed. It was as though the space between heaven and earth had become narrow. Roar! The next moment, a deafening dragon roar reverberated through heaven and earth. The chaotic flame on the golden dragon's body burned even more wantonly. The golden dragon turned into a gigantic fire dragon. It was as though even the space around it was burning. Zhao Lei's face darkened when he felt the aura of the golden dragon. He felt that the lightning energy in his body was being suppressed. Nie Tian's lightning energy came from the 9-star dragon vein. After being strengthened by the divine lightning glyph and the glaze chi, it could suppress almost any lightning attribute energy. Chapter 1553. In the void, the shadow of a dragon soared into the sky, its aura surged, and the 9 heavens rumbled. Although Zhao Lei felt that his strength was being suppressed, he had no way out at this moment. If he retreated, only death awaited him. At this moment, he could only fight with his life on the line. 9th heaven's thunder, one strike. Zhao Lei roared and the power of lightning behind him instantly condensed, transforming into 9 giant lightning bolts that resembled heavenly pillars. They floated in the air like giant dancing snakes. The 9 giant lightning bolts were dozens of meters wide and tens of thousands of meters long. The sky was filled with the terrifying power of lightning. Kill! Upon seeing this, Nie Tian let out a low roar. Not only was there fear in his eyes, but there was even more violent killing intent in them. Kill! 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 Violent sounds of killing echoed in the air. It was extremely violent, and it made people tremble in fear just by hearing it. Nie Tian is so scary. Yang Zhongqiu looked at the scene in the sky with a dumbfounded expression and exclaimed in his heart. His perception was very strong, and he could feel that Nie Tian's aura was even more powerful than Zhao Lei's. At this moment, Yang Zhongqiu realized how stupid it was to rob Nie Tian. Yang Zhongqiu felt lucky that he was on Nie Tian's side. He had a feeling that the silver-haired young man in front of him would one day stand at the peak of the 9 realms. Kaboom! 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 In the void, lightning flashed and thunder rumbled. Dark clouds surged, and it was completely dark. Only the blinding lightning bolts could be seen, as if it was the end of the world. Kaboom! Finally, the golden lightning dragon and the 9 giant lightning snakes collided. In an instant, heaven and earth wailed, and the wind and clouds surged. Endless power of lightning exploded, wreaking havoc in the space. Crack, crack, crack. In the dark sky, countless blinding lightning bolts flashed, like sharp blades that wanted to tear the sky and earth apart. Chi, chi, chi. Nie Tian and Zhao Lei's figures could no longer be seen in the sky. Only ear-piercing noises could be heard. Loud rumbling sounds could be heard, and thunder could be heard. These were 2 waves of lightning clashing and devouring each other, both wanting to tear each other apart. After a long time, the sound of thunder gradually weakened, and the dusky sky gradually became clear. 2 figures appeared high up in the sky. The lightning dragon and the 9 bolts of lightning had already disappeared, turning into the power of lightning and dissipating in the air. Nie Tian's face was pale. His figure stood in the air, but his aura was very stable. There were no wounds on his body. On the other hand, Zhao Lei's entire body was drenched in blood. His face was already beyond recognition, and his entire body was covered in horrifying injuries that were deep to the point bones could be seen. What was even more terrifying was that Zhao Lei's entire body was surging with reddish-gold lightning. His body was actually filled with the power of lightning, constantly tearing apart his body. Why? Zhao Lei's eyes flickered with fear and disbelief. He couldn't understand why he would lose to a mid-god. What kind of power was hidden in Nie Tian's body that allowed him to skip a realm and defeat a mid-stage high god? You want to know why? Nie Tian took a step forward, and the corners of his mouth curled into a strange smile. He said in a cold voice, "It's simple, because I'm stronger than you." His voice was indifferent, but it was full of dominance. The reason why Nie Tian could defeat Zhao Lei was indeed because he was stronger than the latter. This time, Nie Tian had used too many trump cards: the Supreme Dragon Vein, the Thunderbolt Sword Essence, and the Flame of Chaos condensed from the Supreme Twin Flames. Most importantly, it was the suppression of the power of lightning. Nie Tian's power of lightning had an absolute suppression over Zhao Lei, preventing the latter from fully exerting his strength. This was the key to Nie Tian's victory. "This is impossible!" Zhao Lei roared furiously, as though he had gone mad. Bang! However, at this moment, his body could no longer withstand the power of lightning in his body. With a violent shake, his body directly exploded, turning into a mass of bloody light. The tragic scene made everyone suck in a breath of cold air. Even their tailbones felt cold. Nie Tian's strength was so strong that it exceeded everyone's expectations. Zhao Lei, the commander of the Red Lunar Divine Palace's guards, a mid-stage high god expert, ultimately died in the hands of Nie Tian, an early-stage mid-god. When Nie Tian saw that Zhao Lei was finally dead, his tensed body finally relaxed. However, his body trembled slightly, and he violently spat out a mouthful of blood. During the exchange just now, Zhao Lei's power of lightning had also seeped into his body. He was just holding on because he didn't want Zhao Lei to see it. Now that Zhao Lei was dead, he didn't need to hold on any longer. Big brother Nie Tian. Seeing this, Ed leaped to Nie Tian's side and supported Nie Tian. "I'm fine." Nie Tian forced a smile. His pale face was devoid of any color. First, it was the battle with Wang Lin, then Zhao Lei. These 2 battles had consumed all the energy in Nie Tian's body. At this moment, he was extremely weak. Nie Tian raised his hand slightly, put away Zhao Lei's godhead, and erased the divine sense within it. Zhao Lei's godhead contained a powerful lightning force. Absorbing this lightning force could further increase Nie Tian's strength. "Ed, we need to leave this place quickly." Nie Tian frowned. He could feel a large number of cultivators rushing over. He couldn't help but say in a low voice, "N." Ed nodded heavily and landed with Nie Tian. "Lord Nie Tian, this is a vitality-restoring pellet. Please take it." Yang Zhongqiu came to Nie Tian's side and handed him a divine pellet. Nie Tian took it and swallowed it. Yang Zhongqiu was a smart person. He wouldn't play any tricks. After swallowing the vitality-restoring pellet, Nie Tian's complexion improved, and his aura recovered slightly. "Let's go." Without hesitation, Nie Tian's figure flashed, dashing out of the mountain range. The others followed closely behind him. However, because Nie Tian was in a weakened state, he couldn't use the wings of Star Soul, and he couldn't bring others with him. Moreover, Chen Wuqing's injuries weren't light, so their speed wasn't fast. At this time, a large number of cultivators from the Crimson Moon Divine Palace were rushing over. Nie Tian frowned when he felt the Crimson Moon Divine Palace's pursuers getting closer and closer. Suddenly, he thought of something and stretched out his palm. A ball of light appeared in his palm and condensed into a taboo divine boat. "Nie Tian, what are you doing?" Seeing this, Yang Zhongqiu was stunned. He hurriedly said, "The taboo divine boat can only be used once. If we use it again, it won't be able to withstand the impact of the spacetime storm." "Elder Yang, don't worry. We don't need to cross realms. We just need the taboo divine boat to bring us out of here quickly." Nie Tian smiled faintly. Then, he opened the taboo divine boat and gestured for everyone to enter. Yang Zhongqiu immediately understood. The taboo divine boat's greatest use was to cross realms. However, even if it didn't cross realms, its speed was still extremely fast. It was much faster than ordinary divine boat. As soon as everyone entered the realm boat, a thought entered Nie Tian's mind, and the void shook slightly as they flew forward at full speed. The moment the taboo divine boat took off, a strong spacetime resistance surged in the void. It bombarded the taboo divine boat, causing it to shake violently. Fortunately, the taboo divine boat was quite sturdy. It didn't collapse. In just a short while, the taboo divine boat had traveled thousands of miles, leaving the Crimson Moon mountain range far behind. "Let's stop here." Nie Tian looked down at the mountain range that stretched for thousands of miles. He smiled slightly and steered the taboo divine boat to a stop. Boom! At this time, a strong spacetime resistance bombarded the taboo divine boat. The taboo divine boat shook violently, and a huge crack appeared on the boat's body. Chapter 1554. Floating in midair, Nie Tian sensed the unfavorable situation. As a thought entered his mind, he activated his realm boat. Boom! Suddenly, a fierce astral wind came from the sky. It was like a wind blade, cold and sharp. Luckily, Nie Tian and the others were very strong. They were not afraid of this level of astral winds. "Hurry up and leave the divine boat," Nie Tian growled, gesturing for everyone to leave the realm divine boat. Everyone leaped out. Nie Tian was the last to do so. Bang! Just as he leaped out of the divine boat, a loud explosion sounded, and the realm divine boat crumbled into pieces. That was close. Nie Tian stabilized himself and let out a long breath. His face was slightly pale. If they had come out a moment later, they would have been destroyed along with the realm divine boat. The realm divine boat had a terrifying spacetime spirit formation. When it collapsed, the spacetime pressure was so great that even a lord might not be able to withstand it. The others looked at the realm divine boat that disappeared into the void. They were all shocked. "Luckily, we survived." Yang Zhongqiu wiped the cold sweat off his forehead and laughed dryly. Nie Tian turned to look at the others. After making sure that they were all fine, he said, "Let's go down and see what this place is." Everyone nodded in agreement. Then, they descended and entered the mountain range below. "This is ridiculous. We actually came to the cloud-shattering mountain range." Nie Tian took out the map of the God-shocking realm and looked at it carefully. He realized that they had come to the cloud-shattering divine palace's territory. The cloud-shattering land was tens of thousands of miles away from the Crimson Moonland. Nie Tian felt that the realm divine boat had traveled so far in just a moment. Nie Tian looked around. They were in the outermost mountains of the cloud-shattering mountain range. The entire cloud-shattering mountain range was shaped like a long snake. It stretched for tens of thousands of miles. Next, Nie Tian asked Yang Zhongqiu to check on Chen Wuqing's injuries. Fortunately, they were not serious. Big brother Nie Tian, we have come to a place under the jurisdiction of the cloud-splitting divine palace. Will the cloud-splitting divine palace lord come looking for trouble with us? At this moment, Ed took a step forward and asked with a worried expression. During the grand competition of the 12 Shrine, Ed had killed the son of Palace Master Lai Yu. Now that he had come to the cloud-splitting mountain range, he was very worried. The land of Shattered Cloud is so big. How did Palace Master Shattered Cloud know that we are here? Nie Tian chuckled. Ed was worrying too much. Then, Nie Tian scanned the surroundings. Not finding anything suspicious, he found a secluded place for everyone to rest and recover their strength. Fat, what should we do next? Half a day later, Nie Tian stood up. His body had recovered to its peak state. He transmitted his voice to the fat cat. In fact, he didn't know where to go next. Just now, he was busy fleeing in panic, and he had rushed to the cloud-shattering mountain range. Nie Tian remembered that he had promised Zhao Zi that once he obtained the Origin Stone, he would let the latter absorb some origin energy of the Origin Stone. However, the development of the situation was far beyond his expectations. The Origin Stone was used to open the geographical meridian map. Moreover, he had completely fallen out with the Crimson Moon Divine Palace. Moreover, he had made a deal with the Net Above and Earth to give the Origin Stone to the Net Above and Earth. However, the Net Above and Earth hidden guards that were protecting Mo Rushi and Cher were killed in the Divine Shepherd domain, and the Heaven and Earth duo appeared. As a result, this deal seemed very insignificant. The Net Above and Earth duo failed to protect Mo Rushi and Cher, and the Heaven and Earth duo took Cher away, so this deal was meaningless. I will have a chance to meet Zhao Zi in the future. At that time, I will think of a way to make it up to him. Nie Tian smiled bitterly. Nie Tian. At this time, the fat cat appeared on Nie Tian's shoulder and said with a smile, "Take out the map of the God Awakening Domain and the Geographical Meridian map." Nie Tian took out the two maps and opened them. The fat cat looked at the two maps, and its small body moved back and forth, as if it was comparing the two maps. Nie Tian could only understand the map of the God Awakening Domain. As for the geographical meridian map, he could not understand it at all. It's here. Suddenly, the fat cat seemed to have discovered something. Its small paw swept across the map of the God Awakening Domain and left a mark. It said, "This is an entrance to the Nine Dragons' Earth Vein." The entrance to the Nine Dragons' Earth Vein? Nie Tian was stunned. He realized that the location marked by the fat cat was very close to where they were now. It was at most a few dozen miles away. The others also gathered around and looked at the two maps in a daze. Other than the fat cat, no one could understand the geographical meridian map. Wait a moment. The fat cat laughed and swept its fat paw across the map. Glazed chi surged into the God Awakening Domain map and changed the runes on the map. A moment later, 9 dragon-shaped runes appeared on the map, covering the entire God Awakening Domain map. The 9 Dragons' Earth Vein is so big? Looking at the map, Nie Tian instantly realized that the little fat cat had shown the location of the 9 Dragons' Earth Veins on the map. He did not expect the 9 Dragons' Earth Vein to be so big that it almost covered the entire God Awakening Domain. I am also surprised that such a vast Earth Vein is hidden in the small God Awakening Domain. The fat cat chuckled and said, "If the 9 Dragons' Earth Vein is excavated, I am afraid the God Awakening Domain will become more terrifying than the upper realms." The reason why the God Sealing Domain was an upper realm was not because it was located higher than the God Awakening Domain, but because the God Sealing Domain contained denser spirit energy. If the 9 Dragons' Earth Vein of the God Awakening Domain was excavated, the Mother Earth Yuan Qi contained in the vein would be released, and the spirit energy of the entire God Awakening domain would increase by tens of times. If that was the case, the God Awakening domain would also become an upper realm, stronger than the God Sealing domain. Nie Tian looked around and saw that they were not far from a dragon-shaped earth vein. They were at the tail of the dragon-shaped earth vein, and that tail was the entrance of the earth vein mentioned by the fat cat. In that case, let's hurry to the entrance of the earth vein. Nie Tian was very excited. The legendary 9 dragons earth vein was not far from them. How could he not be excited? The fat cat asked Nie Tian to put away the map and reminded, "Don't take out the map again. Just look at the map of the God Awakening domain from now on." The map had the full picture of the 9 dragons earth vein. This map was probably the most precious thing in the God Awakening domain. Nie Tian put away the map and prepared to leave. Roar! Suddenly, a violent roar came from afar. It seemed to be the roar of some kind of divine beast. "Let's go take a look." Nie Tian was startled. He flew in the direction of the beast's roar. His figure was extremely fast. After a few flashes, he appeared in a dense forest. As far as the eye could see, a 1,000-meter-long giant beast was roaring. Around the giant beast, there were many naked, muscular men constantly attacking the giant beast. Hunting beasts. Seeing this, Nie Tian frowned. With a wry smile, he prepared to leave. He was worried about the 9 dragons earth vein and did not want to meddle in other people's business. Roar! But at this moment the beast suddenly roared to the sky. Then, its bloody body emitted a dark golden light. Waves of wild energy were released and rushed in all directions. Chapter 1555. Jin 2. Nie Tian's eyes darkened when he heard this name. It seemed to be a very familiar name. He must have heard it somewhere before. At this moment, countless screams rang out. The giant beast Jin 2 was completely enraged. It directly went berserk. Waves of golden power swept out like a raging wave. The people surrounding it were knocked away. For a moment, miserable screams rang out. Jin was enraged, and his mountain-like body suddenly charged forward. He actually wanted to torture and kill everyone. Walala! However, Jin 2's body had only rushed out halfway when it stopped in midair. It turned out that its 4 limbs were actually locked by huge iron chains. Roar! Jin 2's 4 limbs were restricted. It was even more furious. Blood surged out of its body. Waves of golden power surged out. The 4 snake-like iron chains could not hold on any longer. It seemed like they were going to break in an instant. Clan leader, this golden-furred beast is going berserk. Let's retreat. A middle-aged man sensed that something was wrong. He flashed to the side of an old man and shouted anxiously. Retreat. The old man took a deep look at Jin Tuesday. His eyes revealed great unwillingness, but he still gave the order to retreat. Although Jin 2 was very precious, the lives of his clansmen were more important. Grandpa, this golden-furred beast is about to die. Let me kill it. However, at this moment, an angry roar suddenly rang out. Then, a figure flew out and punched at Jin 2 with his bare hand. Yun Tian, come back! The old man was stunned. Seeing the figure in midair, he immediately shouted. However, it was already too late. Boom! Yun Tian was in midair. His fist had already landed on Jin 2's body. However, this punch did not hurt the berserk Jin 2 at all. Instead, it made Jin 2 even more furious. Roar! Jin 2 roared at the sky. He suddenly raised his front claws and swung them with all his strength. One of the iron chains was broken. The violent power whistled through the air, bloody and violent. Yun Tian. Seeing that the situation was bad, the old man cried out. He wanted to help, but his body trembled and he vomited a mouthful of blood. Jin 2 was very strong. If this claw landed, this young man named Yun Tian would undoubtedly die. Golden-furred beast, die. Just at this moment of life and death, a roar of rage suddenly rang out in the air. After that, a silhouette appeared with a pair of starlight wings spanning several hundred meters behind him. His silhouette was as fast as lightning as he pierced out with his sword. Boom! The sword's shadow descended, and with a muffled sound, Jean Tu's forearm was directly cut off. Immediately, blood gushed out, and a bloody screen appeared in the air. It was an extremely tragic sight. The sudden scene caused everyone to be stunned, and they all looked at the silver-haired young man in midair with astonished expressions. They were deeply shocked by the strength of this person. The person who acted at the critical moment was none other than Tian. Roar! One of Jean Tu's forearms had been cut off by Tian, but it became even more violent. With a furious roar, its huge body actually stood up and swung its forearms at Tian. Tian frowned. He did not expect Jean Tu's fighting spirit to be so intense. In this kind of situation, he still wanted to fight to the death. Die! In the next moment, Tian's face darkened, and his eyes were full of killing intent. He directly blasted out with his sword, and the mighty sword shadow landed on Jean Tu's head, creating a huge bloody hole. Blood gushed out like rain. Roar! Jean Tu's huge body froze, and it let out a scream before death. A pair of golden eyes like the sun and moon stared at Tian. Tian's eyes narrowed slightly. He did not feel a violent aura in Jean Tu's eyes, but a kind of pleading, as if it wanted to obtain something from Tian. No! At this moment, Tian suddenly realized something, and his face darkened. Jean Tu clearly had the ability to break free from the iron chains and leave, but it insisted on killing people. There must be something strange about this. Tian's eyes trembled, and he suddenly looked at the ground. The scene that entered his eyes made his heart tremble. On the ground, in a puddle of blood, there was a furry little fellow. It was about the size of a palm, and its golden fur was shining. Its eyes had not completely opened. It's a little Jean Tu. Tian immediately understood. The reason why Jean Tu did not leave was because it wanted to protect its child. This Jean Tu's fighting spirit was so strong that it did not retreat even when its forearm was cut off. It was precisely because it wanted to protect its child. Thinking of this, Tian's eyes trembled, and he felt very uncomfortable. Even though he had killed Jean Tu to save a person, he could not bear to let a newborn Jean Tu lose its mother. However, this was the world of martial arts, where the strong were respected. Many experts regarded human life as nothing more than grass, let alone a Jean Tuesday. Tian's figure moved, and the wings on his back fell, wrapping up the little Jean Tuesday. The Jean Tu's mother landed on the ground with a loud bang. She stared fixedly at the little Jean Tu beside Tian, revealing a strong motherly love. However, the life aura in her eyes was rapidly weakening, and finally disappeared completely. Don't worry, I will protect your child. Tian sighed and held the little Jean Tu in his arms. The little fellow had not opened its eyes yet, and it had actually fallen asleep. It did not know that its mother had died to protect it. Jean Tu is dead. At this time, the people surrounding the Jean Tu reacted and looked at Tian in the air with fear and shock. They had exhausted all their strength, but still failed to kill the Jean Tu. Tian came and killed it with 2 slashes. This kind of combat strength was really terrifying. Tian also had a puzzled expression at this time. He was very familiar with the name Jean Tuesday. The Jean Tu was one of the 4 great ancient ferocious beasts. The combat strength of an adult Jean Tu was comparable to a peak divine state expert. Why was this Jean Tu so weak? It seemed to be similar to an ordinary 3rd rank or 4th rank divine beast. It was very strange. Even if this Jean Tu was weak, because it had just given birth to a little Jean Tu, it should not only have this kind of combat strength. Tian, the Jean Tu is indeed one of the 4 great ancient ferocious beasts. At this time, the fat cat's voice was heard. She frowned and said, "The ancient Jean Tu was very terrifying. An adult Gene 2 was even more terrifying than a peak divine state expert. Unfortunately, if the Gene 2 wants to grow to the extreme, it needs to devour a very special thing. This thing has disappeared now, so the Gene 2 has become an ordinary divine beast. I see. Nye Tion's eyes slightly narrowed, but he did not ask any more questions. At that moment the old man came to his senses, took a step forward, and thanked Nye Tion sincerely. "Thank you for your help, Lord." "Don't mention it." Nye Tion responded indifferently. He did not want to help at first. Killing a seriously injured Gene 2's mother was not glorious. He was just meddling in other people's business. Without him, I could still kill the Gene 2. However, at this time, the young man called Yun Tian growled in a low voice. His face was very unfriendly. "Shut up!" the old man shouted angrily. Yun Tian's face turned red, and he did not dare to speak anymore. "I am the village chief of Little Rock Village, Yun Qing. This is my grandson, Yun Tian. If I have offended you in any way, please forgive me." Yun Qing bowed slightly and was very respectful. Although Nye Tian was not very old and was not much older than Yun Tian, under the premise that strength was everything, Yun Qing had to lower his head. Chapter 1556. Could Little Rock Village be the entrance to the Nine Dragons' Earth Vein? Nye Tian thought to himself. He then looked at Yun Qing and asked, "Elder Yun, is the Little Rock Village you mentioned about 30 li away from here?" "My lord knows about Little Rock Village?" Yun Qing was astounded. He didn't expect Nye Tian to know about Little Rock Village. As expected, Nye Tian was inwardly surprised. He then smiled and said, "To tell you the truth, I have some matters to attend to in Little Rock Village. Could Elder Yun please take us there?" "No." Before Yun Qing could speak, Yun Tian sternly refused. Little Rock Village has never allowed outsiders to enter. Who knows who you are? Maybe you're a spy sent by the bandits. Nye Tian's eyes narrowed and he couldn't help but glance at Yun Tian. This youngster's talent was not bad. He looked like a teenager, but he already possessed the strength of an early-stage low god. Could he also be an innate godhead cultivator? Nye Tian was stunned when he sensed Yun Tian's strength. Unless it was someone like Ed with a special bloodline and a powerful demon dragon's heart, it was impossible for a teenager to possess the strength of a low god. "Nye Tian, there's something strange about this youngster. He isn't an innate godhead cultivator, but he has absorbed some extremely powerful energy." Fat Cat's voice sounded, reminding Nye Tian to be careful of this youngster called Yun Tian. "You're so arrogant. If it wasn't for Brother Nye Tian, you would have died under that golden beast's feet." Ed couldn't stand it anymore and loudly rebuked, "It's fine that you didn't thank Brother Nye Tian, but you even suspected him of being a bandit. What a heartless and unscrupulous person." "Kid, who are you calling heartless and unscrupulous?" Yun Tian suddenly looked at Ed. His eyes suddenly darkened and became extremely cold. His anger was ready to explode. Ed and Yun Tian were about the same age and strength, early-stage low-god realm. However, Nye Tian estimated that Ed's battle strength was above Yun Tian's. After all, Ed possessed a powerful divine dragon bloodline and had fused with a demon dragon's heart. "I'm talking to you. What can you do to me?" Ed was very unconvinced and replied forcefully, "Brat, you're courting death." Yun Tian was instantly enraged. His figure flashed, and he actually struck out with his palm towards Ed. "If I were afraid of you, I wouldn't be called Ed." Ed was also very angry. He let out a low roar and punched out. The shadow of a dragon whizzed out with a fierce aura. Nye Tian watched from the side and did not stop them. He wanted to see who was stronger, Ed or Yun Tian. Yun Qing didn't make a move either. He seemed to have the same idea. Bang! The fist and the palm collided in midair, creating a loud explosion. Shockwaves surged out in all directions. Ed and Yun Tian actually retreated at the same time, then steadied their bodies at the same time and glared at each other angrily. When Nye Tian saw this, he couldn't help but feel puzzled. He hadn't expected that the collision between Ed and Yun Tian would actually be equally matched. Ed's talent was extraordinary. His divine dragon bloodline was already monstrous. In addition to the heart of the demonic dragon, his battle prowess should be comparable to a late-stage or even a peak low-god expert. However, Yun Tian looked sloppy and ordinary. Nye Tian didn't find anything noteworthy about him. Why was his battle prowess also so terrifying? It was really strange. Brat, you're not bad. Again. Yun Tian steadied his body and looked at Ed with burning eyes. He let out a low roar, his battle intent surging. Come on, come on. Who's afraid of who? Ed was also very violent. He didn't fear Yun Tian at all. Ed, stop. At this moment, Nye Tian stood out and stopped Ed. Yun Tian quickly apologized to this little brother. Yun Qing also stepped forward, looked at Yun Tian, and bellowed angrily. I didn't lose to him. Why should I apologize? Yun Tian's sword-like eyebrows were raised, and his face was full of dissatisfaction. Elder Yun, Ed is also at fault in this matter. I think it's better to forget it. Nye Tian smiled faintly, hinting Ed to stop talking. The child is not sensible. I've made Mr. Nye Tian laugh at me. Yun Qing smiled awkwardly, but his love for his grandson could be seen in his eyes. Nye Tian smiled faintly and said, Elder Yun, I really need to enter Little Rock Village for some business. Please do me a favor. This. Yun Qing looked at Nye Tian with an awkward expression and said, Mr. Nye, to tell you the truth, our Little Rock Village has always lived a simple life. We don't like to interact with people from the outside world. Moreover, there have been more bandits recently. The villagers are in a panic. If I bring a stranger into the village now, I'm afraid the villagers will object. Nye Tian's face couldn't help but darken. He didn't expect Little Rock Village to be like a paradise. Elder Yun, do I look like a hidden member of the bandits? Nye Tian smiled faintly and asked sincerely. Mr. Nye, you misunderstand. I don't doubt your identity. It's just that our Little Rock Village really doesn't like to interact with outsiders. Yun Qing nodded with a sincere expression. He was also a person with experience. He saw that Nye Tian and the others' talent and strength were all top-notch. They definitely couldn't be bandits. Moreover, what he said was the truth. Little Rock Village normally didn't allow outsiders to enter. A group of people who bite the hand that feeds them. Ed couldn't stand it anymore. He said coldly, if it wasn't for Big Brother Nye Tian, many of you would have died. Now it's so difficult to enter the village. It's like it's taking your lives. Ed. Nye Tian's face darkened. He hinted Ed to stop talking. This. Yun Qing's face was embarrassed. He thought for a while and said, Mr. Nye, do you really want to enter Little Rock Village? Yes. Nye Tian nodded heavily. That little brother just now was right. If it wasn't for Mr. Nye, our casualties would definitely be huge. Mr. Nye is our savior. If I don't let Mr. Nye enter the village, I'll feel bad. As Yun Qing spoke, he glanced at the others. Finally, he nodded and said, I'll bring Mr. Nye into the village now. Grandpa. Yun Tian was obviously not happy. He shouted loudly. I'm the village chief. It's decided. Yun Qing replied solemnly. He glared at Yun Tian. Next, the people of Little Rock Village cut up Jin Tu's body and carried it away. Nye Tian followed behind the people of Little Rock Village. His gaze swept across Yun Tian's body from time to time. He was very curious. What kind of power did Yun Tian have in his body to be able to fight against Ed? This youngster is a little strange. Nye Tian smiled faintly in his heart. He didn't think too much about it. After a while, the group arrived at a hidden valley. Nye Tian looked at the valley in front of him. He couldn't help but frown. He realized that this was a dead end. Other than the entrance, the other three sides were all steep cliff. He unconsciously opened the holographic divine glyph. He still didn't find anything strange. At this time, Yunqing took a step forward. He came to the opposite side of the cliff. He formed a strange seal with his hands. Immediately, a ray of light surged out and shot into the cliff. Chapter 1557. What an intricate spell formation! Nie Tian frowned, his face full of astonishment. He had been searching the valley for a long time, but he couldn't sense the spell formation at all. Intricate indeed. Little Fat Cat's voice rang out at this moment as it exclaimed, "This formation should be an ancient formation. I'm afraid that even if I wanted to open this formation, it would be impossible." Nie Tian couldn't help but agree, because he couldn't even sense the aura of the spell formation. Not only was the ancient spell formation powerful, it was also very well hidden. "Mr. Nie, please." Yunqing opened the secret door, stepped back, and gestured for Nie Tian and the others to enter. Nie Tian, of course, knew that Yunqing was still worried about him, but he didn't mind. He smiled faintly and stepped into the passage. The passage was about 4 meters high and 2 meters wide. It wasn't wide, but it was very narrow. The walls of the passage were very smooth, and they shone with a crystal-clear light, as if they had been cut by a knife. Nie Tian only now realized that the secret door was hidden in the cliff, and it was thousands of meters long. After the secret door was closed, the 1,000-meter-thick cliff acted as a barrier. Nie Tian sensed that the cliff contained a very strange power that seemed to be able to strengthen the cliff. This cliff is really terrifying. Even a peek-over god would have a hard time breaking through it. Fat Cat sensed the toughness of the cliff and couldn't help but exclaim, "What kind of place is this little rock village? How could it be protected by such a terrifying spell formation?" Nie Tian frowned, puzzled. An ordinary mountain village couldn't have such a terrifying spell formation protecting it. Furthermore, Nie Tian discovered that almost every villager in Little Rock Village was a lesser god. Even though that wasn't a very high level of strength, it was still ridiculously strong for an ordinary villager. It seems that this Little Rock Village is very unusual. Nie Tian's eyes narrowed and he thought to himself. Soon, Nie Tian and the others walked out of the passage, and a small village appeared in front of them. There was a small bridge over a flowing river, and smoke curled up from the chimney. It was a peaceful scene, like a paradise. If I could live in a place like this with Ru Shi and Cher, it would definitely be great, Nie Tian thought to himself as he looked at the village in front of him. It was a paradise far away from worldly dispute. There was no bullying by the strong and no deceit. Such a life seemed pretty good. Thinking of Mo Rushi and Cher, Nie Tian's expression turned solemn. The pain of not being able to be by one's side was indescribable. "Mr. Nie, this is Little Rock Village." Yunqing faintly smiled, his eyes revealing a strong sense of satisfaction. Nie Tian and the others didn't waste any more time and immediately walked towards the village. Along the way, the villagers pointed at them and whispered to each other. It was obvious that they rarely saw outsiders enter, and they were both curious and fearful. Nie Tian felt the villagers' strange gazes and couldn't help but smile bitterly. He was such a normal person, but he had become a monster here. As they walked, Nie Tian sensed the aura around him, hoping to sense the aura of the 9 dragons' earth vein. He could clearly feel that the Shin Yi in Little Rock Village was much stronger than the outside world, even stronger than the Middle Realm's god shepherding territory. Perhaps this was the reason why the villagers of Little Rock Village were so strong. Yunqing asked the others to disperse, and then said to Nie Tian, "Mr. Nie, please follow me." Under Yunqing's lead, a moment later, Nie Tian and the others arrived at the Little Rock Village's meeting hall. In the hall, the atmosphere was very oppressive. More than a dozen elders stared at Nie Tian, their eyes extremely unfriendly. These people were from the Little Rock Village's Elder Council, and they were currently discussing whether to let Nie Tian and the others stay. Yunqing, Even though you are the village chief, bringing outsiders into the village without permission is against the village rules, right? At this time, a slightly chubby elder opened his mouth and questioned Yunqing. I know this matter is a bit inappropriate, but Mr. Nye saved many people of Little Rock Village. He is the Little Rock Village's benefactor. Yunqing said lightly, glancing at Nye Tian. He forced out a smile. Making the decision to bring Nye Tian and the others into Little Rock Village, for Yunqing, this was very stressful. Little Rock Village's benefactor? At this time, a thin elder stood up, his face dark as he looked at Nye Tian, and said in a low voice, Little Rock Village has always been self-sufficient. We do not interact with outsiders. We do not need benefactors. Yunxian, your words are not appropriate. Yunqing frowned, looked at the elder in front of him, and said in a low voice, Little Rock Village does not interact with the outside world, but we should at least distinguish between kindness and hatred. Mr. Nye saved the people of Little Rock Village. Of course he is the Little Rock Village's benefactor. If you don't want him to stay, I will send them away. Yunxian was the president of the Council of Elders. His position in Little Rock Village was second only to Yunqing. His opinion basically represented the Council of Elders. The other elders would not object. Nye Tian was speechless. He couldn't just leave without doing anything, right? However, at this time, Yunxian sneered and said in a low voice, The location of Little Rock Village is our greatest secret. Since this person has come to Little Rock Village, how can we let him leave so easily? Nye Tian could feel the murderous intent from Yunxian. His eyes couldn't help but narrow. Yunxian, what do you mean by that? Yunqing was also surprised. He did not expect Yunxian to have such a reaction. Since he did not want Nye Tian to stay, then let him go. Was he going to kill Nye Tian to protect the secret of Little Rock Village? At this moment, Yunxian had the intention to kill Nye Tian. These people from the Council of Elders of Little Rock Village were all mid-level gods, and Yunxian himself was a late-stage mid-level god. He saw that there were only 3 mid-level gods on Nye Tian's side, so he did not care about them at all. But how could he have known that Nye Tian, an early-stage mid-level god, had such extraordinary battle strength, and had once killed a high-level god? It was not an exaggeration to say that Nye Tian's strength alone was enough to annihilate the entire Council of Elders of Little Rock Village. Everyone, are you willing to watch this person leave? Yunxian sneered, his gaze turning to the other elders. What does the great elder want to do? We are willing to follow your orders. The chubby elder who first spoke nodded with a smile. His gaze on Nye Tian's group was filled with murderous intent. Nye Tian's face darkened. These people were simply unreasonable. They wanted to kill him. Yunxian, what are you trying to do? Don't tell me you want to kill someone in front of me, the village chief? Yunqing bellowed. He took a step forward, blocking in front of Nye Tian's group. He had never thought that Yunxian would be so arrogant, unscrupulously revealing his murderous intent. Village chief. Yunxian looked at Yunqing, smiled coldly, and said with a face full of mockery, Yunqing, do you think you can still be the village chief? Yunxian, you. Hearing Yunxian's words, Yunqing's face darkened, and he was momentarily speechless. He knew that Yunxian had always coveted the position of village chief, but he did not expect the latter to say it so openly. Chapter 1558. A battle was about to break out in the main hall of Little Stone Village. Nye Tian saw that Yunxian was about to act, but his reaction was extremely calm. He didn't place Yunxian's group in his eyes at all. They were just a bunch of chickens and dogs that couldn't even withstand a single blow. However, this was Little Stone Village, and he didn't want to kill anyone. But if Yunxian insisted, then he couldn't be blamed. Yunxian, have you gone crazy? Yunqing glared at Yunxian and roared. Yunqing, you can call me crazy or stupid. In any case, in order to protect the secret of Little Stone Village, these people must die. Yunxian's eyes were as dark as water, and a cold, killing intent filled the hall. You madman! Yun Qing roared, his face flushing red. How could he not know what Yun Xian was thinking? It was all for the position of village chief. The Yun family of Little Stone Village had two main branches. One was Yun Qing's, and the other was Yun Xian's. Yun Qing's branch was originally very strong, but 5 or 6 years ago, his son died tragically during a hunt, causing his branch to decline. Yun Xian's branch, on the other hand, was rapidly rising. His son Black Dragon's strength had increased by leaps and bounds in recent years, already surpassing Yun Qing's. However, due to the rules of Little Stone Village, Yun Xian and Black Dragon had always endured and didn't forcefully seize power. Now Yun Qing had brought Nie Tian's group into the village, breaking the rules. This was the same as giving Yun Xian a handle that could be used against him, giving him a reason to act. Yun Xian, for a mere village chief position, are you really going to kill your own people? Yun Qing's eyes were scarlet red, clearly enraged. Yun Qing, I don't have time to argue with you. Let's kill this brat first. Yun Xian let out an enraged roar. Without the slightest hesitation, he took a step forward and slapped his palm towards Nie Tian. You're courting death. Nie Tianling coldly stared at Yun Xian, the corner of his mouth twitching. He didn't even draw his sword. Instead, his body moved, and a violent sword energy howled out. Bang! In the next moment, a dull thud resounded as Yun Xian was sent flying, crashing heavily onto the ground, causing the bluestone ground to crack. The sudden and strange scene made all the elders of Little Rock Village suck in a breath of cold air. They looked at Nie Tian in disbelief, not knowing what was going on. You little brat, you! Yun Xian struggled to stand up. But the moment he opened his mouth, he spat out a mouthful of blood. His face turned as white as a sheet, and his eyes were filled with disbelief. His strength was that of a late-stage mid-god, while Nie Tian was only an early-stage mid-god. Why was he sent flying by Nie Tian even though he had attacked first? How could Nie Tian's strength be so terrifying? How could Yun Xian know that Nie Tian hadn't used his full strength in that previous move? Otherwise, he wouldn't have had the chance to stand up again. Nie Tian did not kill him. After all, the other party was an elder of Little Rock Village. Even if he deserved to be killed, it was not his turn to do so. Once again witnessing Nie Tian's strength, Yun Qing couldn't help but tremble. Is there anyone else who wants to kill me? Nie Tian coldly asked as his gaze swept across the elders. He didn't want to use force to suppress others, but these elders were too hateful. Not only did they not want him to stay in Little Rock Village, they even wanted to kill him. He, Nie Tian, was not a pushover. The dozen or so elders were aghast. They didn't even dare to raise their heads to look at Nie Tian. Nie Tian was too terrifying. He wasn't someone they could contend against. Father! At this moment, a thunderous voice suddenly sounded. Then, a tall and sturdy figure appeared, flashing to Yun Xian's side and supporting him. Black Dragon Yun. Yun Qing's gaze darkened when he saw the newcomer. This tall and sturdy figure was none other than Yun Xian's son, Black Dragon Yun. Yun Xian wanted the position of village chief not for himself, but for Black Dragon Yun. As long as Yun Xian became village chief, the next village chief would naturally be Black Dragon Yun. If that was the case, it would be nearly impossible for Yun Qing's bloodline to rise again. Black Dragon. Yun Xian's eyes lit up when he saw Black Dragon Yun appear. He pointed at Nie Tian and roared, "It was this brat who injured your father. You dare injure my father?" Black Dragon Yun frowned, his entire body releasing a berserk aura. He was the one who wanted to kill me. I was only forced to retaliate. Am I supposed to just stand there and let him kill me? Nie Tianling sneered and stepped forward, releasing his aura as well. Boom! The two auras collided, and a huge explosion resounded through the air. Nie Tian didn't move at all, but Black Dragon Yun retreated repeatedly. He almost couldn't stand and fell. You! Black Dragon Yun felt the blood in his body churn. He forcefully swallowed the foul blood that had reached his throat, and his eyes revealed deep fear. He was a peak middle god, but he was actually forced to vomit blood by Nietion's aura. This was too terrifying. It was just a simple clash of auras, but Black Dragon Yun already knew that he wasn't Nietion's match. What about me? Nietion faintly smiled, the corners of his mouth rising in a strange arc. Father, let's go. Black Dragon Yun's gaze was extremely gloomy, as if he was thinking about something. Finally, he roared and left with Yun Xian. Yun Xian and Black Dragon Yun left dejectedly. The other elders saw that the situation wasn't right and left one after another. Why provoke me? Nietion looked at the figures outside the great hall, the corners of his mouth curling up as he laughed inwardly. Originally, everyone could have gotten along peacefully, but Yun Xian insisted on killing Nietion. In the end, he shot himself in the foot. Seeing Yun Xian and the others leave, Yun Qing couldn't help but bitterly smile and awkwardly say, Mr. Nie, I've made a fool of myself. Nietion was a smart person. How could he not see the conflict between Yun Qing and Yun Xian? He faintly smiled and said, What are you saying, Elder Yun? I've caused trouble for you. For a mere village chief position, Yun Qing and Yun Xian were fighting against their own clansmen. It was truly regrettable. Ai. Yun Qing let out a long sigh. He didn't blame Nietion at all. How could he not know that even without Nietion, Yun Xian and Yun Xian would eventually act? This was something that was bound to happen. In truth, he had long since grown tired of this village chief position. It was just that Yun Tian hadn't matured yet. If he gave up the position now, he was afraid that Yun Xian and Yun Xian wouldn't be able to tolerate Yun Tian. Yun Tian was the most talented person in Little Stone Village in hundreds of thousands of years. When he was born, he had attracted the five-colored divine light of Stone Village's forbidden area. Mr. Nie, let's not talk about this for now. This old man will first arrange a place for you to stay. Yun Qing forced a smile and said to Nietion. Then, Yun Qing led Nietion and the others out of the hall. He was preparing to arrange a place for Nietion and the others to stay in his own house. Along the way, Nietion carefully sensed his surroundings, not letting go of a single spot. Nietion, look over there. At this time, the fat cat's voice suddenly resounded with great excitement. Nietion's gaze slightly froze. He looked into the distance. There was a dense forest there, and there was nothing unusual. Nietion opened his starry sky gaze, and at the same time, the holographic divine runes shrouded the area. The scene in his mind suddenly changed. In the dense forest, there was a faint five-colored halo that was dazzling and dazzling. Fat, what is that place? Nietion frowned and asked in confusion. Other than the five-colored halo, he didn't sense any other abnormalities. That is the entrance to the 9 Dragons' Earth Vein. Fat Cat smiled and said excitedly. The entrance to the Earth Vein. Nietion's eyes slightly trembled as he exclaimed in his heart. Mr. Nie, what's wrong? Yun Qing couldn't help but ask when he saw Nietion's abnormal reaction. Nietion calmed down a little. He pointed at the dense forest and asked, Elder Yun, what is that place? Yun Qing's expression flickered as he looked in the direction Nietion was pointing at. Chapter 1559. Yun Qing's expression changed when she heard Nietion's sudden interest in the forbidden area of Little Rock Village, but she quickly recovered and smiled. It's just a forest, there's nothing strange about it. Nietion's eyes narrowed. He had already caught Yun Qing's reaction, and the latter's attempt to hide it was too obvious. Oh! Nietion knew that Yun Qing was hiding something, but he didn't show it and only smiled. After a while, Nietion's group arrived at an ordinary courtyard. The courtyard wasn't big, but there were a few simple rooms. It wouldn't be a problem for a few more people to live here. Nietion's group was arranged into their respective rooms. Nietion and Fat Cat discussed for a bit and decided to explore the forest after nightfall. Nietion didn't want to trouble Yun Qing anymore, so secretly exploring the forest was the best choice. With his strength, he shouldn't be discovered. The little guy is awake. In the room, Tian couldn't help but smile as he held the little Jean too in his arms. "Ya!" The little Jean too opened its golden eyes and stared at Tian. It waved its claws as if hungry. Tian randomly found something and carefully fed the little Jean Tuesday. After eating, the little guy obediently fell asleep. "Fat, you said that the Jean too needs to devour a special thing to grow to its peak. What is it?" Tian asked with a frown. Fat Cat's figure flashed and appeared on Tian's shoulder. Looking at the sleeping Jean too, she shook her head and said, "The reason why the Jean too is ranked as one of the 4 great ancient beasts is because its blood contains the power of the golden flame. The power of the golden flame is extremely frightening and is close to the power of the source. Only by devouring pure gold flint can it activate the power of the golden flame in its blood. The blood of ordinary Jean too is red, but the blood of a Jean too that has activated the power of the golden flame is golden." At this point, Fat Cat couldn't help but smile bitterly. The power of the golden flame in this little Jean too's blood is very dense and close to that of its ancestor. Unfortunately, the pure gold flint disappeared long ago. Even if it can awaken a small amount of the power of the golden flame, its battle prowess will only be at the 4th or 5th rank at most. What a pity! Crimson Gold Flint. Tian made a mental note of the name after hearing the little Fat Cat's words. Perhaps he would have the chance to find it in the future. If he had one of the 4 great ancient ferocious beasts by his side, he would have incredible combat strength. "Grandfather, I'm back." At this moment, a familiar voice rang out from outside the room. It was Yun Tian's voice. Following that, Yun Tian seemed to have noticed something and cried out, "Grandpa, you let them stay here?" Hearing Yun Tian's irritated tone, Tian couldn't help but frown and walk out of the room. "Yun Tian," Tian said. "Yun Tian," Yun said. Tian smiled. Yun's tone. Tian smiled bitterly. This youth seemed to be quite hostile towards him. "Yun Tian, go back to your room and do what you should be doing." Yun Qing walked over and glared at Yun Tian with a frown. "Yes." Yun Tian's face froze, but he still went back to his room. "This kid went to that forest." Just as Yun Tian turned around, little Fat Cat let out a strange cry. Its expression changed slightly as it said, "No wonder he's so strong. Looks like his secret is hidden in that small forest." "What do you mean?" Tian asked with a frown. Fat Cat chuckled and said, "This kid called Yun Tian must have absorbed the power of the Mother Earth vital vein. However, the Mother Earth vital vein has undergone a miraculous change in his body. It actually became a power similar to the power of the bloodline. Seems like we can only find out the truth after entering that forest." Tian nodded. He looked forward to entering the forest even more. However, he didn't know that the forest was the forbidden area of Little Rock Village. Only a few people could enter. Others couldn't enter and outsiders couldn't enter. After nightfall, everything fell into silence. Tian sat in his room. Holographic divine prints spread out silently. After confirming that the others were cultivating or asleep, he stood up. He was prepared to enter the small forest alone and scout out the situation before doing anything else. Tian walked out of his room. His aura was restrained to the extreme. A chaotic aura surged out from his body. He disappeared into the darkness. After a while, Tian came to the outside of the forest. When he was a few hundred meters away from the forest, he felt a weak power of a formation. Tian frowned and muttered to himself, "This forest is indeed not simple." The closer he got to the forest, the more intense the 5-colored halo in his eyes became. It was as if there was a 5-colored divine pool in the forest that was constantly releasing 5-colored light. Forbidden area. Tian silently appeared outside the forest. Suddenly, he saw a small stone tablet with the words "Forbidden Area" written on it. This is the Little Rock Village's forbidden area. Nye Tion's eyes focused and a trace of surprise flashed across his face. He stopped and sensed the aura of the formation around him. His expression became more and more surprised. At this time, he discovered that the stone village's forbidden area was protected by a giant killing formation. If he didn't know the method to break the formation, one wrong step would lead to eternal damnation. Let me study this killing formation. Fat Cat also discovered the killing formation. Its figure appeared, but it chuckled. Then, it released balls of colored glaze energy from its body and carefully tested the killing formation. Nye Tion saw the colored glaze energy surging in the killing formation, but he didn't trigger it. Every time, he could find a safe route. Fat's attainments in formations are really terrifying, Nye Tion said to himself in admiration. Now, he began to agree with Fat Cat's words. Bringing Fat Cat out of the colored glaze tower was the wisest decision he'd made in his life. After a while, the colored glaze energy found a safe route in the layers of killing formation. It was clearly displayed in front of Nye Tion. Nye Tion, follow the directions of the colored glaze energy, and you can enter the forest. Fat Cat wiped the sweat from its forehead and chuckled. Okay. Nye Tion agreed. Then, he stepped forward and wanted to enter the forest. However, at this time, he suddenly discovered something and couldn't help but exclaim, Fat, you grew a second tail? Nye Tion suddenly discovered that the little fat cat had actually changed from one tail to two at this time. It's all thanks to you. Fat Cat chuckled. Then, it moved and returned to the origin space. Nye Tion laughed. He didn't quite understand Fat Cat's words. What did the latter growing a second tail have to do with him? He didn't know that Fat Cat only grew a second tail because it soaked in the ocean of demons and gods every day and crazily absorbed the power of the demons and gods. At this speed, Fat Cat would soon grow all 9 tails. By then, it would be a real chinchilla with 9 tails. Nye Tion didn't think too much and stepped into the forest. Chapter 1560. In the forbidden area of Little Rock Village, a vague silhouette was carefully moving. This silhouette was none other than Nye Tion. The multicolored light is getting stronger. After entering the forbidden area, Nye Tion felt that the multicolored light was getting stronger, and he could feel the power contained in the light. It was very scary. Keep going, we will soon have an extraordinary harvest. Fat Cat seemed to have discovered something, and laughed, unable to hide the excitement in her laughter. Nye Tion felt the multicolored light, and soon arrived outside a valley. This is it. Nye Tion stopped outside the valley, and immediately confirmed that the multicolored light was coming from the valley. The valley in front of him was very steep, both sides were steep cliffs, and there was only a very narrow path that led into the valley. Go in. Fat Cat was very excited, and her figure appeared again, and her fat body entered the valley at an unbelievable speed. Seeing this, Nye Tion quickly followed. After stepping into the valley, Nye Tion was stunned by the scene in front of him. He was petrified on the spot, and his mouth was wide open, but no sound came out. Fat Cat also had the same reaction, her 2 big eyes were wide open, and the shock in her heart was all expressed on her face. In the valley, a giant tree was floating in the air, its branches were luxuriant, and the light was shining like a god standing in the air. This giant tree was thousands of meters tall, and its roots were like thousands of giant snakes, dancing in the air. This tree was floating in the air. What was even more strange was that the giant tree was emitting multicolored light. Circle after circle, like ripples, filled the whole valley, and also dissipated out of the valley. How is this possible? Nye Tion stared at the giant tree for a full 10 seconds, and finally reacted and said in surprise. He had seen the spirit ginseng of destiny in the chaotic abyss, and it also grew in the air. But the spirit ginseng had a spiritual root, and the root formed a spiritual formation, absorbing the spiritual energy of the heaven and earth. Although the roots of this giant tree were well developed, it did not form a God array, so it could not absorb the power of God. Then, what did it rely on to grow? Nyetian looked down. At this time, the fat cat also reacted. It let out a weird cry and pointed downwards. Nyetian was taken aback. He looked down and realized that this was not a valley, but a bottomless abyss. Nyetian looked down. The abyss was so deep that the bottom couldn't be seen. It released a strange power that made one's heart tremble. The abyss is releasing a powerful force. Nyetian sensed the aura of the abyss and his expression changed. He immediately understood. The giant floating tree didn't actually need to actively absorb energy. It was the abyss below that was constantly releasing energy into the giant tree's body. Is this? The next moment, Nyetian suddenly thought of something, and his eyes couldn't help but tremble. He exclaimed in a shrill voice. Yes. The fat cat laughed and shouted excitedly. This abyss is the entrance to the 9 dragons' earth veins. Nyetian was stunned. He was so shocked that he couldn't speak. The 9 dragons' earth veins used the abyss as the entrance. The uncanny workmanship of nature was breathtaking. At this moment, Nyetian also understood why the power of God in Little Rock Village was so much denser than the outside world. It was because the abyss in front of him was constantly releasing Mother Earth energy. Nyetian, do you see the fruit on the tree? The fat cat suddenly smiled and pointed at the giant tree. That kid called Yuntian ate the fruit of this giant tree, that's why he became so strong. This tree, this fruit, it seems to be the 9 leaves Bodhi. Nyetian looked at the giant tree and the small red fruit, frowning. The 9 leaves Bodhi was a type of tree that wasn't rare. Yes, it should be the 9 leaves Bodhi. The fat cat nodded and said, this 9 leaves Bodhi was originally an ordinary tree, but it appeared in an unusual place. After absorbing Mother Earth energy for years, it finally grew into a divine tree. Nyetian laughed bitterly and couldn't help but nod. A normal 9 leaves Bodhi could only grow to a few hundred meters tall. 1,000 meters was the limit. The 9 leaves Bodhi in front of him was 5,000 to 6,000 meters tall, and its aura had completely changed. It had already surpassed the limits of the 9 leaves Bodhi. From this, it could be seen how important opportunity was. Nyetian was able to grow to this stage not only because of his talent and perseverance, but also because of opportunity. Yuntian's strength increased by leaps and bounds after eating the 9 leaves Bodhi fruit. And the 9 leaves Bodhi is only at the entrance of the 9 dragons' earth veins, so the power it can absorb is limited. Based on this, if it enters the earth veins, it can absorb a terrifying amount of power. Nyetian suddenly thought of this, and his eyes couldn't help but tremble. But when he glanced at the abyss below, he didn't dare to be sure what would appear in the abyss. After thinking for a while, Nyetian decided to leave this place first. No matter what, this was the forbidden area of Little Stone Village. He decided to tell the truth to Yunqing. If the latter didn't want him to enter the earth veins, then he would think of another way. The fat cat also didn't want Nyetian to take the risk and agreed to leave. Nyetian didn't hesitate anymore. After leaving the abyss, he immediately walked out of the forest. When he entered the forest-killing formation, he suddenly heard the sounds of fighting. His expression darkened and he sped up. He was worried that Yun Xian and Black Dragon had made a move against Yunqing. Brothers, kill them all! Just as he walked out of the forbidden area of Little Stone Village, Nyetian heard violent sounds of fighting. Not far away, a group of black-clothed people were chasing after villagers. These black-clothed people weren't weak. Most of them were peak low gods, and many were mid-gods. The murderous aura of the black-clothed people was very heavy. Not only did they kill the strong men, they didn't even let the women and children go. Bastard! Seeing this scene, Nyetian's expression darkened. The blood in his body surged and the astral soul wings appeared on his back. His silhouette was like lightning as he rushed over. Although the black-clothed people were strong, in front of Nyetian, they were like clay chickens and pottery dogs. They couldn't even withstand a single blow. Bang, bang, bang. After a series of muffled sounds, Nyetian directly killed more than 10 black-clothed people and saved more than 10 villagers. His silhouette moved and the astral soul wings swept up all the villagers and directly flew into the sky. In the blink of an eye, Nyetian returned to his residence. His silhouette landed and he placed the villagers in the courtyard. Mr. Nye. Seeing Nyetian return, Yunqing immediately cried out in fear. Old Yun, what's going on? Nyetian's expression darkened and he growled. The mountain bandits have attacked. Yunqing's old face was gloomy and full of grief. Mountain bandits? Nyetian was stunned for a moment and said in a heavy voice, How is this possible? Little Stone Village was almost isolated from the world. Outside, there was a mountain cliff that was thousands of meters thick blocking the way. Not to mention the mountain bandits, even an expert like Huijioshan wouldn't be able to attack. Traitor! In the next moment, Nyetian immediately reacted. If the mountain bandits wanted to attack, there was definitely a traitor. Someone must have let the mountain bandits in. Yun Xian, you're muddle-headed. Yunqing also understood at this time and wailed in grief. He felt as if his heart was being cut. Only he and Yun Xian knew how to enter Little Stone Village, so it was self-evident who the traitor was. Chapter 1561. Seeing Yunqing's reaction, Nyetian's eyes narrowed and his face darkened. Although he had only met Yun Xian once, he could tell that Yun Xian was a man of deep schemes. Yun Xian had let the bandits into the village in order to obtain the position of village chief. This was a grave mistake. Yun Xian and Yunqing's internal strife was one thing, but colluding with the bandits from the inside and outside was another matter altogether. Yun Xian's actions had undoubtedly dragged the peaceful little rock village into an abyss of no return. Kill! By this time, the bandits had arrived. From afar, there were hundreds of them. Each and every one of them was like a pack of hungry wolves, shouting and attacking. Along the way, many villagers' corpses were lying on the ground. Son of a bitch! Yun Tian roared and charged forward like a bolt of lightning. Yun Tian! Yunqing couldn't help but cry out. He knew that Yun Tian was young and hot-tempered. If he charged forward like that, he would be in danger. Yun Tian's figure was like a bolt of lightning. Violent 5-colored halos gushed out from his body and condensed into a long spear in his hand. It was his original soul, the rainbow pierces the sun. Boom! The spear pierced forward and a bandit's flesh and blood was torn to shreds. He didn't even have the time to scream. Brat, how dare you kill people of our Green Wolf Bastion? You're courting death. When the other bandits saw this, they all roared in anger and swarmed over. Countless attacks came crashing down on Yun Tian like a tsunami. Most of these bandits were at the peak of Low God realm. Yun Tian was only an early-stage Low God. Even though his combat strength was astonishing, he was still forced to retreat in the face of so many experts. Die! Just when Yun Tian's silhouette was still in the air, a tyrannical voice suddenly rang out, after which a silhouette akin to a ferocious wolf dashed out and slammed a palm down. The boundless might of the palm was as vast as the mountains and as vast as the seas, causing Yun Tian to have difficulty breathing. The newcomer was a martial artist in green robes. There was a frightening scar on his face. His aura was as vast as the sea. He was a mid-god expert. Yun Tian! Yunqing roared. Just as he was about to attack, he saw a flaming silhouette flashing across the sky. Then, a flaming sword whizzed out. Boom! The sword's shadows were like the wind, swift and fierce. In just an instant, the scar-faced cultivator died a miserable death. Not even his bones were left. Even the divine sense in his godhead was directly erased by the soul-devouring sword intent. This person had the same level of strength as Nye Tian, but there was a world of difference in their battle prowess. It was impossible for him to block a single sword strike from Nie Tian. Retreat! Nie Tian's figure stood in midair. He looked at Yun Tian coldly and growled, "I won't retreat, I'm going to kill them all." Yun Tian's eyes were bloodshot as he roared, swearing to kill all the bandits in front of him. Nie Tian's face sunk. Yun Tian was still too young and impulsive. This brat killed the 19th boss. Let's attack together and kill him. At this moment, the other bandits reacted. When they saw Nie Tian kill the scarred cultivator, they did not show any fear. Instead, their killing intent soared. These bandits were all valiant men. Their daily lives were spent licking blood from the edge of their blades, so they didn't know what fear was. Boom! 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 In the blink of an eye, dozens of martial artists attacked at the same time, and an endless barrage of attacks pressed down on Nie Tian. "Aren't you afraid?" Nie Tian sneered in the face of the joint attack of dozens of experts at the pinnacle of Low God stage. The corners of his mouth curled into a sinister smile as he said in a deep voice, "Since you're not afraid, then die together." As the word die fell, the sword Absolute Heaven Beheader suddenly pierced out. Blood chi and sword intent converged at the same time. The sword sealing Forbidden Array was activated. Sword runes surged in the air, releasing the most extreme killing intent. Sword Dragon devours the world. The sword's edge streaked across the sky. The brilliance of the sword shot out tens of thousands of meters away. A violent sword dragon rumbled out and pressed down violently. Rumble! In the void there was an explosion. Endless sounds of explosions were mixed with ghostly wails and wolf-like howls. The ground was directly torn apart. Several terrifying cracks appeared on the ground within 10,000 meters. Blood splattered in the air, adding a strong smell of blood to this restless night. Under one sword, dozens of cultivators died tragically in an instant. This was the terrifying strength of Nie Tian. Wow! Yunqing, who was watching from behind, couldn't help but take in a deep breath. Nie Tian's power was beyond his imagination. Yun Tian was also stunned. He didn't expect this silver-haired young man, who looked only a few years older than him, to be so terrifying. Nie Tian killed dozens of mountain bandits with one sword, but his face was as calm as still water. His figure moved and landed next to Yunqing. He asked, "Elder Yun, what should we do next?" Yunqing was in a dilemma. He was the village chief of Little Rock Village. His next decision would determine the survival of Little Rock Village. If they relied on Nie Tian's strength, there was some hope for the villagers to escape from Little Rock Village. But this would undoubtedly result in heavy casualties. Moreover, Yunqing knew that there were several high-level deities in Green Wolf's stronghold. Their strength was so strong that even Nie Tian couldn't compete with them. There is only one way now. Yunqing pondered. Suddenly, he frowned and said, "Go to the forbidden area." Finally, Yunqing made the decision to bring the villagers into the forbidden area of Little Rock Village. Under normal circumstances, ordinary villagers were not allowed to enter the forbidden area. Only the geniuses recognized by the village chief and the elders had the right to enter. But now that the situation was critical, they couldn't care less. "Mr. Nie, do you remember the forest you asked me about?" Yunqing turned to look at Nie Tian and asked. "I know." Nie Tian was very straightforward and said, "Follow me." Of course, Yunqing didn't know that Nie Tian had already entered the forbidden area of Little Rock Village. He even saw the 9-leaf Bodhi above the abyss. "I'll charge in front. Chen Wuqing, you guard the back. Elder Yun and Elder Yang, you two are responsible for saving the villagers along the way. The others, guard the perimeter and protect the villagers." Nie Tian glanced around and said loudly. Among the people present, he was undoubtedly the strongest, followed by Chen Wuqing. Yunqing and Yang Zhongqiu were also mid-level deities. The rest were Nieqiu, Ed, and Yun Tian. They had 70 to 80 villagers with them, but only a few had fighting strength. The Green Wolf Stronghold's people were very cunning. They first killed the villagers who had fighting strength. So the people left in Little Rock Village were basically the old, the weak, the women, and the children. "Let's go," Nye Tian bellowed, gazing into the distance. Then, he blurred into action, leaving a trail of dust in his wake. Stop them! Nye Tian and the others were a big target, especially the 70 to 80 villagers. In the eyes of the bandits, they were like sheep. Countless bandits rushed over from all directions, wanting to stop Nye Tian and the others. "Those who stop me die." Nye Tian faced the swarming bandits without a trace of fear in his eyes. There was only the most decisive killing intent. After a roar, he thrust it out with his sword. The sky was filled with sword images. The surging killing intent was fierce and cold. In the next moment, countless screams sounded. Dozens of bandits were sent flying. They either died or were heavily injured. Nye Tian's fighting strength was not something a group of bandits could compare to. Chapter 1562. On the high slope, a cold and murderous gaze locked onto Nye Tian. This person's face was gloomy and his eyes were cold. He was obviously a sinister person. He was none other than the third boss of Green Wolf Bastion, Zhao Yongji. Green Wolf Bastion had 3 high god experts, and Zhao Yongji was one of them. He was the one who personally commanded the attack on Little Rock Village. At this moment, there were 2 people standing next to Zhao Yongji, a middle-aged man and a gray-robed elder. They were Yun Xian and Black Dragon. Zhao Yongji's cold gaze locked onto Nye Tian and he asked in a deep voice, "Yun Xian, who is this kid?" "Third boss, this kid was brought into the valley by Yun Qing." Yun Xian slightly bowed and said in a very respectful manner, "Third leader, you mustn't underestimate him. Although this youngster's strength is only at the early stage mid-god realm, his combat strength is very strange. This lowly one was injured by him." Zhao Yongji creased his brows and smiled playfully. He said disdainfully, "He's just a mid-god. What can he do? With third boss here, even if this kid has heaven-defying abilities, he won't be able to do anything," Yun Xian said flatteringly. However, there was a hint of unconcealable fear in his eyes. He had personally experienced Nye Tian's abilities, so he was very afraid of the latter. He even had a feeling that Zhao Yongji might not be a match for Nye Tian. Of course, he didn't dare to say it out loud. Otherwise, Zhao Yongji would definitely kill him. In Little Rock Village, Nye Tian was charging at the front with incomparable savagery. He killed anyone who stood in his way. Wherever he went, the formation of the mountain bandits was immediately broken. Most of them died tragically under his sword, and those that slipped through the net immediately fled in fear. Along the way, more and more villagers were rescued. Soon, there were 500 to 600 people. Nye Tian gradually felt the pressure of having to protect so many people at the same time. "Mr. Nye Tian, we must head for the forbidden area as soon as possible," Yun Qing's voice sounded, reminding Nye Tian. "All right." Nye Tian nodded solemnly. In order to save more people, he deliberately took a detour. Otherwise, he would have been out of the forbidden area long ago. Nye Tian's figure was like a dragon, madly rushing towards the forbidden area. "Third leader, this is bad." At this moment, Yun Xian couldn't help but frown when he saw Nye Tian's group running towards the forbidden area. What happened? Zhao Yongji's expression darkened. Nye Tian's battle prowess had exceeded his expectations. In the blink of an eye, he had killed more than 100 people from Green Wolf Bastion. "Third leader, that side is the forbidden area of Little Rock Village. If we let Yun Qing bring the villagers into the forbidden area, then it will be terrible," Yun Xian said in a hurry, his forehead dripping with cold sweat. He did not expect that Yun Qing would actually bring the villagers into the forbidden area. "Forbidden area?" Zhao Yongji was stunned for a moment, then said, "The 9-leaf Bodhi you mentioned is in the forbidden area, right?" Yun Xian nodded heavily. The The nine-leaf Bodhi was the reason why the Green Wolf Bastion attacked Little Rock Village. Yun Xian made a deal with the Green Wolf Bastion. The Green Wolf Bastion would help him become the village head, and he would let them enter the forbidden area of Little Rock Village and take away the nine-leaf Bodhi. However, the scene in front of him was beyond Yun Xian's expectations. He did not think that the people of Green Wolf Bastion would wantonly kill the villagers after entering the village. However, he still had hope in his heart. He hoped that some of the villagers would survive, and then the people of Green Wolf Bastion would leave with the nine-leaf Bodhi. Once he became the village head, he would no longer let the people of Green Wolf Bastion enter the village. After all, entering Little Rock Village was not that simple. Without Yun Xian, the people of Green Wolf Bastion would not have been able to enter Little Rock Village. Stinking brat, do you think you can play tricks in front of me? Zhao Yongji frowned, then laughed coldly. His figure suddenly moved, and he stood tall in the air. His gaze swept across the ground, and he saw a child running away in panic. He waved his hand and grabbed the child in the air. The child looked to be about 6 or 7 years old. His body was suspended in the air, and he was being suppressed by a force. He immediately let out a miserable howl. Silver-haired brat, stop! Zhao Yongji's lips curled into a sinister smile, and he growled in a low voice. Nie Tian's figure stopped. He was about to reach the forbidden area. When he saw the child in the air, his eyes burned with anger, and the blood in his body was about to rush out. He knew that if he did not stop now, the child would die. But if he stopped, the bandits would swarm over. Chen Wuqing and the others alone would not be able to fight against so many bandits. Silver-haired brat, if you don't stop, this child will die. Seeing that Nie Tian's figure was still running, Zhao Yongji shouted in a low voice. He exerted a bit of force, and the child could not bear the pain and screamed miserably. The mournful screams echoed in the night sky, and it was extremely ear-piercing. Bastard! Nie Tian roared, and his figure shot up into the sky. He could not imagine that a person could be so shameless. A dignified high god actually used the life of a 5 to 6-year-old child to threaten him. Brat, come at me! Zhao Yongji laughed and said in a cold tone, a mere mid-god, you can't even protect yourself, yet you want to save someone? What a joke! After speaking, Zhao Yongji exerted more force, wanting to torture the child to death. Bastard! Nie Tian suddenly sensed Zhao Yongji's action. He roared in anger, and his eyes turned bloodshot. His pupils violently trembled, and a terrifying spiritual pressure was released, forming a clear spatial fluctuation in the air. Absolute confinement was activated, and a terrifying spiritual pressure whizzed out, enveloping Qin Wentian. This is a spiritual pressure. Zhao Yongji instantly felt his divine sense being attacked, and he screamed in fear. He was unable to continue speaking, and his mind instantly fell into a daze. Succeeding in an instant, the astral wings on Nie Tian's back flapped, and he moved like the wind, saving the child. A soft energy gushed out from his palm, and the child fell to the ground. Yun Tian's silhouette flickered, and he caught the child. Die for me! In the next instant, a cold light flashed in Nie Tian's eyes, and he slashed out with his sword, aiming to kill Zhao Yongji. After all, Zhao Yongji was a high god, and his reaction speed was extremely fast. At this moment, he had already awoken from the spiritual pressure. Facing Nie Tian's sword, Zhao Yongji struck out with his palm, but it was still a little too late. Boom! The sword shadow flashed past, and the cold sword intent was incomparably sharp. One of Zhao Yongji's arms was directly chopped off, and fresh blood gushed out. My arm! Zhao Yongji screamed in pain, and his eyes were filled with incomparable terror. How could he have imagined that Nie Tian's strength was so strange? In such a short time, Nie Tian actually released a terrifying spiritual pressure, causing him to be momentarily dazed. What a pity! Nie Tian frowned when he saw the bloody scene, and he felt deep regret. Originally, he had the opportunity to instantly kill Zhao Yongji, but he chose to save Zhao Yongji first, and missed the best opportunity. Although he had chopped off one of Zhao Yongji's arms, this kind of injury was nothing to a high god, and he would recover very quickly. "Smelly brat, I'm going to tear you apart." Zhao Yongji calmed down, and the blood gushing out from his arm stopped. A new arm actually began to grow out. Although he was enraged, he didn't attack. After losing an arm, his combat strength wasn't at its peak, and he didn't dare to attack recklessly. Chapter 1563. On the ground, dozens of bandits rushed towards the villagers. Chen Wuqing and the others attacked one after another, but they were too busy to stop all the bandit. In the blink of an eye, dozens of villagers were slaughtered, and blood dyed the ground red. A bunch of animals! Nie Tian was in midair. His blood energy surged, and the sword Absolute Heaven Slash came crashing down. The sword's shadow was like a mountain, directly killing several bandits. These mountain bandits were simply inhumane, even wanting to kill defenseless villagers. Nie Tian's figure was extremely fast. After a few flashes, he killed dozens of bandits, and then his figure moved, madly running towards the forbidden area. Outside the forbidden area, Nie Tian's figure stopped. He jumped up and stood in midair, signaling everyone to stop. These villagers rarely entered the forbidden area. The forbidden area's killing array was very complicated, and it was very difficult to avoid it. Hovering in midair, Nie Tian saw that the bandits were still charging towards him. He slashed out with his heaven-severing sword. A sword shadow fell, leaving a deep fissure in the ground. This crack separated the bandits from the villagers. "Anyone who crosses this line will be killed without mercy," Nie Tian roared. His voice was like thunder, resounding in the night sky, extremely intimidating. The hundreds of bandits' ears were like thunder, and they couldn't help but be stunned. Their figures suddenly stopped, they were actually intimidated. Nie Tian's eyes were gloomy, and his figure moved, landing beside Yunqing, and asked, "Old Yun, there are so many villagers, how do we enter the forbidden area?" Yunqing looked at the hundreds of villagers behind him, and his face couldn't help but turn ugly. Little Rock Village's forbidden area was protected by a killing array, and that killing array was an ancient killing array. It was basically impossible to break, and could only be avoided according to a specific route. But these villagers didn't know how to avoid the killing array, so it was really difficult to enter the forbidden area. Even if Yunqing told the villagers the route to enter the killing array, it would still take a long time. Yunqing explained the situation, and with a face of embarrassment, he finally said, "Mr. Nie, if you want all these villagers to enter the forbidden area, it is impossible." Nie Tian frowned, and his face was very gloomy. At this time, he didn't need to hide anything, and directly shouted, "Fat! I understand." The little fat cat appeared on Nie Tian's shoulder and chuckled. Then, its figure flashed, heading towards the forbidden killing formation. Yunqing was stunned. He didn't expect Nie Tian to have a spiritual pet that could talk. It wasn't strange that many people raised spiritual pets, but there weren't many spiritual pets that could speak. Fat Cat came to the outside of the forbidden area, and released his chi, and immediately marked a path to the forbidden area. He had already memorized the route, so he was very clear. "Everyone, listen up. Everyone follow the path that I have drawn and walk forward. No one is allowed to step out of the path, or you will be consigned to eternal damnation. Do you understand?" Little Fat Cat said in a loud voice, its voice unprecedentedly serious. "Chi by Fat by Yun it by and Chi of it and Yun of the Ling and by Yun, and this." Yunqing looked at the path marked by Fat Cat, and couldn't help but be stunned. This was obviously the route to the forbidden area. How did Fat Cat know? But there was no time to think about this. The most important thing was to let the villagers enter the forbidden area as soon as possible. "Everyone, listen, no matter what, Do not walk out of the path, that will kill everyone. Yunqing said loudly, his face was very serious. The villagers all nodded. They knew that this was the forbidden area of Little Rock Village, so of course they would be extra careful. In Little Rock Village, there were often people who violated the rules and wanted to enter the forbidden area, but they all ended up dead. Yun Tian, you lead the way. Yunqing nodded and said to Yun Tian. Yun Tian often entered the forbidden area, so it was best for him to lead the way. Grandpa, I want to stay and protect the villagers. Yun Tian growled, as if he was unwilling. Impudent! What time is this, and you still want to cause trouble? If you really want to protect the villagers, then lead the way. Yunqing roared. At the moment of life and death, how could he allow Yun Tian to throw a tantrum? Seeing that Yunqing was really angry, Yun Tian didn't say anything more, turned around and walked towards the forbidden area. Under Yun Tian's lead, the villagers began to slowly enter the forbidden area. But the path was very narrow, only around 1 meter wide, and could only allow one person to safely pass through. The speed of entering the forbidden area was very slow, hundreds of villagers, no one knew when all of them would enter. A bunch of trash, what are you all still standing there for? Kill them for me. At this time, Zhao Yongji's figure appeared, and seeing that the bandits were watching from outside, not daring to go forward, he couldn't help but roar. At this time, his arm was about to recover, and he would soon be able to recover to his peak combat strength. The bandits reacted, and immediately rushed towards the forbidden area. Upon seeing this, Nie Tian's figure moved, and the sword intent in his entire body suddenly erupted. An incomparably overbearing sword aura soared into the sky, and it condensed into a 3,000-meter-long sword shadow in the air. The sword shadow surged with chaotic flames, and it emanated incomparably scorching, killing intent. So scary! Seeing this scene, the bandits couldn't help but tremble, and their eyes revealed intense fear. Boom! Crack! Nie Tian's face was as gloomy as water, and he slashed down with his sword. The instant the sword shadow landed on the ground sank violently, as though it was about to collapse. Boom! In the next moment, rolling sword waves whizzed out like raging waves, rolling and roaring. Those bandits nearby were directly swept up by the sword waves, and they were torn to shreds by the sword intent. The other bandits were also sent flying, and their injuries weren't light. The power of one sword shocked the entire scene. Nie Tian's eyes were cold and gloomy, and he said coldly, "It's still the same words, those who cross this line, kill without mercy." At this moment, his entire body was releasing violent killing intent, and the killing intent that seemed to materialize pervaded the air, as though he was a god of death, looking down on everything. The eyes of the bandits trembled, and they actually involuntarily retreated. They weren't afraid of death, but Nie Tian was too powerful. Rushing over now was simply sending themselves to death. Trash. A bunch of trash. Seeing everyone retreating, Zhao Yongji couldn't help but curse angrily. Originally, he could have killed everyone in Little Rock Village and completely occupied the village, but he didn't expect that Nie Tian would suddenly appear and completely ruin his plan. The bandits were afraid of Nie Tian's terrifying combat strength, and didn't dare to approach. Zhao Yongji's strength hadn't recovered yet, so he didn't dare to attack. For a moment the situation was in a stalemate. Of course, Nie Tian was happy to see this stalemate, because the villagers were moving towards the forbidden area. Yun Xian, you shouldn't have done this. At this moment, Yunqing stepped forward and looked coldly at Yun Xian and his son behind Zhao Yongji. He said sorrowfully, "For the position of village chief, you colluded with the Green Wolf Bastion to slaughter the villagers. These people are all your clansmen, people who have lived with you their entire lives. Yunqing, you forced me to do this." Yun Xian also stepped forward, and his eyes flashed with violence as he said coldly, "If you had given up the position of village chief earlier, I wouldn't have had to do this. All of this is because you forced me to do this." Yun Xian was truly shameless. He was clearly the one in the wrong, but he still pushed the blame onto Yun Qing. It's just the position of village chief, is it really that important? Yun Qing was heartbroken, and his eyes were filled with anger and confusion. Was it really worth it to betray one's own clansman for a position? Of course it's important. Yun Xian replied coldly, and the corners of his lips curled into a sinister smile. If the position of village chief wasn't important, I wouldn't have killed Yun Luoxing. Luoxing. Hearing this name, Yun Qing's eyes sank and his expression changed. Yun Luoxing was his son, who died several years ago. Chapter 1564. Yun Xian. Outside the forbidden area, Yun Qing was enraged when he heard the truth about his son's tragic death from Yun Xian. With a roar, he soared into the sky. His aged figure struck out with his palm, sending a torrent of palm energy towards Yun Xian. Yun Xian had killed his son and was absolutely irreconcilable. Even though Yun Qing considered Yun Xian a clansman, how could he let go of this deep-seated hatred? Old fool, you're courting death. However, at the same time that Yun Qing jumped out, a ruthless voice sounded. Then, a tall and sturdy figure appeared in the air. Black qi surged around his body. His qi was like a terrifying dark cloud, surging violently. Yun Heilong. Nie Tian's expression darkened when he saw the figure in midair. Yun Heilong was a peak midgod and so was Yun Qing. However, Yun Qing seemed to have hidden injuries. His battle prowess was much weaker than Yun Heilong's. If the two were to clash head-on, Yun Qing would definitely be injured. Roar! However, at this moment, Yun Heilong had already made his move. He punched out. The black gas around his body instantly condensed into a giant black dragon. It roared furiously and pounced towards Yun Qing with bared fangs and brandished claws. Pfft! Before the giant black dragon could reach him, Yun Qing's aura had already been crushed. His body swayed in midair, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. Elder Yun! Nie Tian cried out in alarm when he saw this. His figure flashed and he flew out. At the same time, he thrust his sword, wanting to block Yun Heilong's fatal blow for Yun Qing. Good chance. At the same time, Zhao Yongji suddenly sneered. His eyes were filled with intense murderous intent. His arm had completely recovered and his battle prowess was at its peak. Without any hesitation, he soared into the sky and struck out with his palm. A bizarre bone claw appeared in midair, releasing an ice-cold and sinister aura. Boom! The sinister bone claw suddenly descended, grabbing at Nie Tian. An ice-cold murderous intent bloomed in the air. Nie Tian, be careful! Chen Wuqing cried out in alarm when he saw this. His eyes were trembling. Even though he was very confident in Nie Tian, the person who had attacked was a high god. Nie Tian struck out with his sword to block Yun Heilong's fatal attack. At the same time, his body trembled as he activated his Windbreaker High Heavens battle armor. Boom! In the next moment, there was a loud cracking sound as the sinister bone claw landed on the Fengji High Heavens battle armor. A glaring crack appeared on the armor before it instantly exploded and shattered. Nie Tian's body sank, and he was sent flying, crashing heavily into a boulder not far away. His entire body sank into the boulder, showing the strength of the impact. Mr. Nie Tian. Yun Qing couldn't help but exclaim when he saw Nie Tian. Nie Tian was the strongest person on their side. If he was killed or seriously injured, it would be terrible. Humph! Zhao Yongji stood proudly in midair and let out a sinister laugh. He said, "This lad only has the strength of an early-stage mid-god. If he takes a direct hit from my ghost wolf bone claw, he will definitely die." Zhao Yongji was an early-stage high god. One claw attack from him was enough to instantly kill a peak mid-god. Even a powerhouse like Yun Heilong would have no chance of survival if he were to take that blow. Impossible! Chen Wuqing's eyes trembled as he cried out in alarm. "Sir! Big brother Nie Tian! Nie Qiu and Ed also cried out in alarm at the same time. Is he really going to die? However, at this moment, a familiar voice sounded. The boulder shook and a figure leaped out, standing proudly in midair. His eyes were sharp and murderous. This. Zhao Yongji stared at the figure in midair. His eyes trembled violently and his expression changed. He was dumbfounded. Clearly, he couldn't believe what he was seeing. At this moment, not only was Nie Tian not dead, he wasn't even seriously injured. He was in perfect condition. How is this possible? Zhao Yongji's eyes flickered. Nie Tian's appearance had overturned his understanding of martial arts time and time again. The first time, he had almost killed him. The second time, he was completely dumbfounded. I'm fine. Nie Tian stabilized his body, looked at the crowd below, and smiled faintly. Although he looked calm and determined on the surface, he was very worried in his heart. After a series of battles, his divine energy was almost depleted. The energy in his demonic yuan was about to dry up. His spirit was also very tired. Who are you? Zhao Yongji calmed down slightly and asked in a trembling voice. Humph. Nie Tian's eyes were cold and disdainful. He sneered and said coldly, You don't deserve to know my name. Zhao Yongji had previously threatened Nie Tian with the life of a child. Nie Tian despised people like him the most. Stinking brat, you are courting death. Zhao Yongji roared furiously. He then turned to the people behind him and said furiously, Everyone, listen up. Kill him. The people of Green Wolf Bastion looked at Zhao Yongji with trembling eyes. They were extremely frightened. They were too afraid of Nie Tian and did not dare to step forward. A bunch of trash. Zhao Yongji was furious. He said loudly, I will block this brat. You all kill him. After saying that, Zhao Yongji moved and pressured Nie Tian. He knew that Nie Tian's strength was strange, but with his strength, even if he could not kill Nie Tian, it was more than enough to hold him back. Nie Tian frowned. He was most worried about the situation in front of him. After all, Zhao Yongji was a high god expert. Once he was held back, Chen Wuqing and the rest would not be able to stop so many bandits. Boom! However, at this time, Zhao Yongji's palm had already slammed down. The sinister bone claw flashed coldly in the night sky, as if it was going to tear the world apart. Astral Soul Armor! Nie Tian roared and moved his body. Endless astral energy surged out and condensed into a huge armor around him. He was like an indomitable giant, indestructible. Boom! The ghost wolf's bone claw landed and bombarded the astral soul armor. There was a loud sound in the air, but Nie Tian's body was like a mountain and did not move at all. Kill! On the other side, the bandits rushed over from other directions and attacked the villagers. Chen Wuqing was held back by Yun Heilong and was in a fierce battle. Yun Qing and Yun Xian were fighting fiercely. Yang Zhongqiu, Nie Qiu, Ed, and the rest could only barely protect themselves. Ah! In the next moment, screams rang out. Some of the villagers who were crowded around the periphery were mercilessly slaughtered. How could flesh and blood withstand the iron hooves of tigers and wolves? ******************** Nie Tian saw this scene and roared. His blood and chi surged. Without hesitation, he activated the Starry River sky restriction and an invisible barrier enveloped everyone. Huh! Zhao Yongji seemed to have sensed something. His eyes darkened slightly as he exclaimed in surprise. At this time, Nie Tian's figure moved. His speed was so fast that a shadow of him appeared in the air. In an instant, countless sharp sword shadows appeared in the Starry River sky restriction. Suddenly, there were cries and howls. Everywhere the sword shadows passed, there was blood. It was a glaring sight. In the blink of an eye, Nie Tian killed dozens of bandits, intimidating everyone and forcing the bandits to retreat. What a strange boy! Zhao Yongji saw Nie Tian's attack and was shocked and frightened. His eyes were filled with fear. His heart sank and he said, This boy must not be allowed to live. Chapter 1565. Up in the air, Zhao Yongji saw Nie Tian's bravery and killing intent surged in his heart. Behind him, a phantom of a wolf appeared. It was thousands of meters long, and its eyes flickered with a cold light. A sharp killing intent permeated the air. Everyone could feel the killing intent. Their gazes trembled as they involuntarily stared at the sky. Nie Tian abruptly turned around and stared at the gigantic phantom of the wolf. His eyes couldn't help but tremble. It seemed like this time, Zhao Yongji was going to go all out. "Brat, I admit that you are very strong. Unfortunately, you met me." Zhao Yongji's gaze was like a wolf's as he stared fixedly at Nie Tian. "Everything shall end here." "Is that so?" Nie Tianling coldly replied. There wasn't fear in his eyes, but a strong killing intent and battle intent. Under normal circumstances, he naturally wouldn't fight head-on with Zhao Yongji. But now, within the forbidden space of the Astral River, Nie Tian was confident that he could kill Zhao Yongji in a single move. Seeing that Zhao Yongji and Nie Tian were about to have a life-and-death battle, everyone involuntarily retreated. Zhao Yongji looked at Nie Tian and couldn't help but frown. He could faintly sense that something was wrong. But since he had already reached this step, he absolutely couldn't give up. "Brat, die!" With a roar, Zhao Yongji's body moved. The gigantic wolf behind him suddenly pounced out like a ball of black flames, pressing down on Nie Tian. Sky-devouring blood. Nie Tian's silhouette hovered in the air. The sword intent and blood chi around him surged unceasingly. Once again, he unleashed the forbidden technique. A blood-colored sword shadow appeared in the air. Outside the sword shadow, the primal chaos flame and the astral soul flame appeared at the same time. The two different types of flames actually fused together perfectly, burning fiercely and illuminating half the night sky. Kill. The killing intent in Nie Tian's heart had already been set. With a low roar, he slashed out with his sword. The blood-colored sword shadow roared, resembling a gigantic dragon, twisting and turning in the air. In an instant, the space was filled with sword will and was pulled tight. Waves of terrifying power surged out violently. What a terrifying sword strike! Upon seeing Nie Tian's aura, the onlookers couldn't help but gasp, their eyes trembling. No one had expected Nie Tian to be able to release such a terrifying power. Zhao Yongji was also stunned for a moment. Nie Tian's strength had once again exceeded his expectations. But at this moment, he had no way out and could only fight with his life on the line. Boom! Crack, crack, crack! A loud sound rang out as the spirit wolf's shadow and the blood-red sword shadow finally collided. The void shook violently for a moment, and then an ear-piercing explosion sound rang out. An endless amount of power wreaked havoc, and even the heavens and earth were shaking. Blood chi, sword intent, sword light, wolf shadow, black berserk power, endless power mixed together, causing the void to become chaotic. The crowd stared at the sky with burning eyes. They could no longer see the figures of Nie Tian and Zhao Yongji. Bang! At this moment, a loud explosion sounded. The giant spirit wolf couldn't withstand the pressure of the sword intent and directly collapsed. No! Suddenly, Zhao Yongji sensed that something was wrong. He screamed, but it was too late. The murderous sword shadow pressed over like a stormy sea, directly drowning Zhao Yongji's figure, leaving only a bloody light. The third leader of the Green Wolf Bastion, a dignified superior deity, died tragically. Not even his bones were left. After a long time, the chaotic void became clear, and a figure appeared in midair. It was Nie Tian. With the support of the Forbidden Galaxy Flight, Nie Tian killed Zhao Yongji with one sword. This was the third superior deity martial artist he had killed. At this moment, Nie Tian's whole body was trembling, and blood was gushing out. He was already lacking in strength. Activating the Forbidden Galaxy Flight had already reached its limit. Using the forbidden move of the Proud Sword incantation consumed his physical strength to the extreme. After killing Zhao Yongji, Nie Tian also suffered heavy injuries. At this moment, he was close to the limit of his martial body. Nie Tian. Chen Wuqing saw that Nie Tian was still holding on, and his eyes trembled as he shouted. Nie Tian didn't respond. His cold eyes stared at everyone below and he roared, "Scram! Scram! Scram! Scram!" A ferocious roar reverberated in the void, domineering and fierce. Everyone heard the thunderous sound in their ears. Their eyes trembled, and they began to involuntarily retreat. Nie Tian was too terrifying. He wasn't someone they could contend with at all. Don't go, he's already at his limit. He can't hold on any longer. At this time, a cold voice sounded. Yun Xian seemed to be shouting crazily. He could see that Nie Tian was already an arrow at the end of its flight and couldn't hold on any longer. Unfortunately, the people of the Green Wolf Bastion didn't listen and fled in all directions. The bandits were scared away. Only Yun Xian, Black Dragon, and a few elders of Little Rock Village were left. Yun Xian, you're the only ones left. Nie Tianling smiled coldly. His figure moved and he descended slightly. He stared at Yun Xian and the others with bloodthirsty eyes as he spoke sinisterly. Stinking brat, you've already used up all your strength. Do you still want to show off? Yun Xian forced himself to calm down and spoke in a low voice. He then looked at the others. However, the eyes of the elders in name behind him trembled, and they couldn't help but walk over to Nie Tian. The people of the Green Wolf Bastion had entered Little Rock Village and slaughtered the villagers. This wasn't something these elders wanted to see. They had been deceived by Yun Xian and had no choice but to stand on his side. Right now, Yun Xian was weak, so they naturally wanted to stand on Yun Qing's side. You guys, what are you doing? Yun Xian couldn't help but roar when he saw the people beside him leave. He was about to go crazy. Father, we don't need them. The two of us are enough. At this time, Yun Xian suddenly walked over and stared at Nie Tian and the others with murderous eyes. He was extremely violent. Black Dragon, could it be that you want to? Yun Xian suddenly realized something. His expression changed, and even his voice became shrill. Nie Tian frowned and used his divine sense to probe. He could faintly sense an extremely terrifying power surging within Yun Xian's body. His heart couldn't help but sink. Could it be that he still has a terrifying trump card? Boom. At this time, Yun Xian's entire body suddenly released a terrifying aura, following which, black runes began to appear around his body. It was extremely strange. Nie Tian frowned. He suddenly discovered that the black runes contained an extremely terrifying power. When he probed it, he actually felt a bone-chilling sensation. This is... Yun Qing seemed to have realized something at this time. His expression changed, and he exclaimed in a low voice, Yun Xian, you've actually cultivated a forbidden technique. Forbidden technique? Nie Tian frowned. He didn't know what Yun Qing meant by forbidden technique. So what? Yun Xian snickered, and his aura became more and more intense. The black runes began to surge, turning into something like a tattoo. It imprinted itself on Yun Xian's body, forming a layer of black scale armor. Village Chief, what I cultivate is one of the 3 forbidden techniques of our Yun family, the Dragon Inscription Talisman. Yun Xian stared at Yun Qing with a murderous gaze and said coldly, Let me tell you, your son, Yun Luoxing, died to my Dragon Inscription Talisman. Yun Xian, you... Yun Qing was so furious that his blood surged. His body actually trembled, and he vomited another mouthful of blood. At this moment, he finally understood why Yun Xian and his son were able to kill Yun Luoxing. Why had Yun Xian's strength increased so quickly in just a few years? So it was because Yun Xian cultivated a forbidden technique. The Yun family had 3 great forbidden techniques. The rules of the family stated that only overgods could cultivate them, and they could only cultivate one. Chapter 1566. Yun Qing was infuriated. How could he have imagined that his son would die to the Yun family's forbidden technique? He did not know what kind of power the dragon mark talisman could bring to a martial artist, but the aura that Heilung Yun displayed had far exceeded that of a peak mid-god. It was even more terrifying than that of high god Zhao Yongji. Nie Tian looked at Heilung Yun and couldn't help but crease his brows. He could sense that an extremely terrifying energy was surging within Heilung Yun's body. This energy was hidden deep within his blood. It had a strong stimulating effect on the martial body, but at the same time, it was also extremely destructive to the martial body. As Heilung Yun cultivated the dragon mark talisman, he must have been suffering from the backlash of the talisman's power at all times. His lifespan was at least half or more than that of a martial artist of the same level. The aura around Heilung Yun was surging violently and vaguely reached the strength of a mid-stage or even late-stage high god. This is bad. Nie Tian creased his brows and sensed his body's condition. His heart sank. After killing Zhao Yongji, he had nearly exhausted all of his energy. He was barely hanging on by a thread. At this moment, it would be extremely difficult for him to even defeat an ordinary mid-god, let alone a late-stage high god. Yunqing, all of you, prepare to die. Heilung Yun's furious roar sounded. Terrifying black dragon patterns surged around his body. His terrifying aura swept across the world. The activation of the dragon mark talisman allowed Heilung Yun's strength to temporarily break through the limits of his martial body and reach mid-stage high god. In addition, the talisman's power stimulated his martial body. His current combat strength was comparable to a late-stage high god. Stinking brat, I'll kill you first. Black Cloud Dragon glared at Nie Tian, his eyes filled with killing intent. Among those present, the person he hated the most and feared the most was Nie Tian. If not for Nie Tian's sudden appearance, he and his father would have taken control of Little Rock Village. Moreover, he was most apprehensive about Nie Tian's strength. Therefore, he wanted to kill Nie Tian first. Die! The black cloud dragon roared and its aura surged. Countless black dragon marks gathered in the sky, and a black force roared out, pressing down on the inner sky. The black berserk power was like a giant dragon coming out of the abyss, its imposing manner was vast and cold, and its dense killing intent was undoubtedly revealed. With one strike, Black Cloud Dragon had to kill Nie Tian. Nie Tian took a deep breath, and his eyes instantly became resolute. Even if he was already an arrow at the end of its flight, he would never stretch his neck and wait for death. Kill! Nie Tian let out a low roar. Blood qi surged from all over his body, and the sword intent around him was released once again. Endless blood qi and sword intent mixed together, creating a heroic and shocking scene. This time, he gave it his all without hesitation. Boom! In the void, a blood-red sword shadow appeared and suddenly pressed down, causing the void to tremble. Boom! With a loud explosion, the two extreme forces collided, causing the heavens and earth to shake and the void to tremble. Shockwaves rolled out in all directions. Bang! In the blink of an eye, Nie Tian felt a violent force descend upon him. With a muffled sound, his figure was directly sent flying, leaving a trail of blood in the air. Nie Tian! Everyone's eyes froze as they cried out in shock. Under countless gazes, Nie Tian's figure heavily smashed into a giant tree, and the giant tree that was several meters thick snapped. The moment Nie Tian's figure landed on the ground, his entire body was covered in blood, and his flesh was a bloody mess. Mr. Nie. When Yunqing saw this, his eyes trembled, and tears streamed down his face. Nie Tian was an outsider. He originally had the chance to leave Little Rock Village, but he had stayed in order to save the villagers. Is this your strength? Black Cloud Dragon took a step forward and laughed wildly. You can't even withstand a single blow. As he spoke, Black Cloud Dragon's figure moved, and he actually crazily attacked Nie Tian. At the same time, more than a dozen villagers of Little Rock Village appeared and blocked Black Cloud Dragon. They said in unison, Black Cloud Dragon, stop! Scram! Black Cloud Dragon roared angrily. With a wave of his hand, he directly slapped a villager to death. Black Cloud Dragon was extremely ruthless. He actually killed even his own clansmen. Black Cloud Dragon, you even want to kill your own clansmen? Yun Qing was enraged, and his eyes trembled violently as he roared. I will kill anyone who dares to stop me. Black Cloud Dragon took a step forward, and the aura around him directly sent more than a dozen villagers flying. Those dozen figures were still in the air when they turned into a bloody light, and not even their bones remained. At this moment, Nie Tian's figure stood up again. His entire body was bathed in blood, and his appearance could no longer be seen. Black Cloud Dragon's dragon mark talisman was too powerful, and Nie Tian had already reached his limit and could no longer fight. Stinking brat, you still dare to stand up? I will tear you apart. When Black Cloud Dragon saw that Nie Tian actually stood up, he couldn't help but fly into a rage. With a roar, he leaped high into the air and slapped down with his palm. The black dragon marks actually condensed into a black dragon that surged towards Nie Tian. You are not allowed to hurt him. At this moment, Chen Wuqing's figure appeared. His figure moved, and his dark dust spear shot out, stabbing towards Black Cloud Dragon. At the same time, Nieqiu, Yang Zongqiu, and Yun Qing also attacked Black Cloud Dragon. However, Black Cloud Dragon only sneered. He casually waved his other hand, and a black wave of air surged out, directly sending Chen Wuqing and the others flying. In the next instant, the huge black dragon with heavy killing intent swooped down, violently attacking Nie Tian. Die, die! At this moment, Black Cloud Dragon let out a maniacal laugh. His entire person seemed to have gone mad, and he seemed to have seen the scene of Nie Tian being killed. High God Sword Formation, open! At the last moment, Nie Tian relied on his remaining trace of strength to stimulate the berserk blood qi in his body, once again activating the High God Sword Formation. Sword Formation runes frantically surged in the air, releasing waves of extremely frightening energy. Boom! The Sword Formation runes condensed, and sword images soared into the sky. An unyielding battle intent blossomed at this moment. Kaboom! In the next instant, the huge black dragon and the blood-colored sword images collided. With a loud bang, the sword images were unable to withstand the huge black dragon and directly exploded. Nie Tian had already used all his strength, but even if he possessed the most unyielding battle intent, he couldn't make up for the difference in strength. After all, Black Cloud Dragon had already broken through to the mid-stage High God realm, and the power of the Dragon Mark Talisman was far greater than ordinary power. It was simply impossible for Nie Tian, who was at the end of his tether, to fight against Black Cloud Dragon, who was at the peak of his power. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. In the void, boundless sword intent exploded and attacked the huge black dragon, exploding with ear-piercing sounds. At the same time, the dragon marks on the black dragon's body were actually torn down, turning into balls of runes that circulated in the air. The black dragon marks surged and directly entered Nie Tian's body. Immediately, an intense pain, as if his body was being torn apart, assaulted his entire body. Nie Tian couldn't help but let out a blood-curdling scream, and his entire face became distorted. Ha ha! Seeing this scene, Black Cloud Dragon actually let out hysterical laughter and loudly said, "Stinking brat, I'll let you have a taste of the backlash of the Dragon Mark Talisman." Chapter 1567. The reason why the Dragon Inscription Talisman was listed as one of the Yun family's 3 great forbidden techniques was that it possessed an extremely terrifying backlash. Black Cloud Dragon cultivated the Dragon Mark Forbidden Talisman. While its strength was rapidly increasing, it was also constantly enduring the backlash of the talisman. He endured such immense pain for the sake of becoming Little Stone Village's village chief one day. However, all of this was destroyed by Nie Tian. How could he not hate Nie Tian? The reason why the father and son duo wanted to become village chief was actually because of another reason: the three great forbidden techniques and the Yun family's secret. Yun Xian was the first elder of Little Stone Village's Council of Elders. He unintentionally learned that the Yun family was actually a family that had existed since ancient times. Later on, due to certain reasons, they came here and became a hidden family. In ancient times, the Yun family was once an abnormally powerful family, relying on the three great forbidden techniques. Of the Yun family's three great forbidden techniques, the dragon inscription talisman that he cultivated was only the weakest. The other two were even more terrifying. However, the Yun family's rules stipulated that only over-god-level martial artists could cultivate the forbidden technique. It was precisely because of this rule that the Yun family declined again and again until it became an ordinary village. Black Dragon Yun wanted to become village chief precisely to obtain the three great forbidden techniques. At the same time, he also wanted to understand the Yun family's hidden secret. In order to achieve his goal, he did not care about anything. Even if he had to ally with the Green Wolf stronghold, even if he had to slaughter his own clansmen, he would not hesitate. Currently, Black Dragon Yun wanted to let Nye Tian have a taste of the backlash of the Dragon Inscription Talisman. He wanted to use the Dragon Inscription Talisman's backlash to torture Nye Tian to death. Arg! Even more dragon inscriptions surged into his body. Nye Tian felt like there were thousands of insects gnawing away at his body. His body and soul were slowly being eaten away. This feeling was simply despairing. The life force in his body was rapidly disappearing uncontrollably. Nye Tian. Chen Wuqing could not help but cry out when he saw Nye Tian enduring immense pain. However, he was currently also heavily injured. Even standing up was difficult. The others could not do anything. They could only watch helplessly. Yun Heilung, have you gone mad? Not far away, several Stone Village elders couldn't bear to watch any longer and couldn't help but shout. A bunch of fence-sitters die. Black Dragon Yun abruptly turned around and looked at those elders. With a cold laugh, he directly sent out a palm strike. A black berserk force whizzed out, and those elders did not even have the time to scream before they died instantly. Black Dragon Yun had gone mad, daring to kill anyone. Brat, aren't you going to die? At this moment, when Black Cloud Dragon saw that Nye Tian was still alive, it couldn't help but sneer coldly. Then, it released even more berserk black dragon tattoos that surged into Nye Tian's body. However, at this moment, Nye Tian did not scream again. Instead, he became calm. What's going on? Black Cloud Dragon frowned, not knowing what was going on. Black Dragon, this brat is too strange. It's better to kill him directly. Yun Xian, who had been watching the battle all this time, couldn't help but shout, Black Dragon, this kid is too strange. It's better to kill him directly. Black Dragon Yun was also afraid that something unexpected would happen. After nodding his head, a black vortex surged out of his palm, and he sent out a palm strike at Nye Tian. At this moment, Nye Tian seemed to have fainted and did not have any reaction at all. If this palm strike landed, his martial body would not be able to withstand it. The black palm force roared and ferociously pressed down, but Nye Tian still did not have any reaction. However, just as the fatal palm strike was about to land on his body, a strange scene suddenly occurred. Boom! Nye Tian's body suddenly trembled, and a mysterious force surged out. It was actually a transparent layer of water that enveloped Nye Tian. This layer of water looked very fragile, but it gave off an extremely mysterious feeling, as if it contained an endless amount of energy. If one looked carefully, the shape of the water layer was very strange. It was actually the shape of a teardrop. Tear. That's right, the water layer that had appeared around Nye Tian was the tear that Cher had shed when she left, the tear of a princess. Boom! In the next moment, the violent palm strike landed on the tear of a princess, but it was like a clay ox entering the sea. There was no reaction at all. The protective power of the tear of a princess was extremely terrifying. Unless Black Dragon Yun was an overgod, it was impossible for him to break through the tear of a princess. At the same time, an extremely strange change occurred within Nie Tian's body. The black dragon inscriptions surged into his body, and after wreaking havoc for a while, they actually slowly calmed down. Then, they began to fuse with his dragon vein, turning into inscriptions that were branded onto the dragon vein. Nie Tian had actually directly absorbed and fused with the dragon inscription talisman. At the same time, Nie Tian felt that the tear of a princess had fused with his body, as if it had fused with his blood. It caused extremely profound changes to his blood. The tear of a princess fused with his blood and gradually disappeared. The layer of water around Nie Tian's body also slowly weakened. However, his strength was also rapidly recovering. His presence could not be stopped from becoming stronger and stronger. Black Dragon Yun suddenly sensed that Nie Tian's presence was rapidly growing stronger. He could not help but frown, and his face was filled with shock and fear. He said in shock, "How is this possible?" Nie Tian was clearly at the end of his tether, and he had basically used up all of his energy. How could he suddenly recover? And what was that layer of water around his body? Just who is this brat? Black Dragon Yun's expression was extremely ugly. Undisguisable panic appeared in his eyes. Nie Tian was far too terrifying. He was actually still alive under these circumstances, and his strength was miraculously recovering. Black Dragon, kill him! Kill him! Yun Xian also sensed that something was wrong. He roared out and he was about to go crazy. He could feel that Nie Tian's strength was recovering and becoming stronger. If Nie Tian really recovered to his peak, then Black Dragon Yun might not be his match. Stinking brat, I don't care who you are. I will definitely kill you today. Black Dragon Yun immediately calmed down. He let out a deep roar, and his entire body surged with a ruthless and bloodthirsty aura. Boom! With a punch, Black Dragon Yun gathered all the strength in his body. The dragon inscription talisman surged out, and the black dragon appeared again. It crazily attacked Nie Tian. Kaboom! The black dragon smashed into the tear of a princess. There was a loud explosion, and a crack actually appeared on the membrane of the tear of a princess. Because the tear of a princess was slowly fusing with Nie Tian's blood, the protective power was also becoming weaker and weaker. It was gradually unable to resist Black Dragon Yun's attacks. PFFF. Finally, the tear of a princess could no longer hold on. It turned into a ball of water and disappeared. At this moment, Nie Tian's tightly closed eyes suddenly opened. His eyes were like the sun and moon, releasing a sharp light. When Black Dragon Yun saw that Nie Tian had suddenly woken up and sensed that the latter's aura had actually recovered to its peak, his eyes couldn't help but tremble. He was momentarily speechless. Chapter 1568. When Nie Tian woke up again, he felt that his body had completely recovered. At the same time, his strength had also increased. More importantly, he discovered that his Fiend God power had awakened again. From 2 strands of Fiend God power, he now had 4 strands of Fiend God power. The awakening of the Fiend God power had caused Nie Tian's combat strength to have a qualitative leap. There was another strange thing. His dragon veins had actually fused with the power of the Dragon Mark Talisman. The 9 dragon veins were branded with the Dragon Mark Talisman and appeared extremely strange. Arrogant! Black Dragon Yun looked at the sinister smile on Nie Tian's face and forced himself to calm down. He growled in a low voice. Although Nie Tian's strength had recovered and his aura had increased, Black Dragon Yun believed that Nie Tian was still not his match. One had to know that his current combat strength was comparable to a late-stage high god. Nie Tian was only an early-stage mid-god. How could he fight him? At this time, When the others saw that Nye Tian's strength had suddenly recovered and even become stronger, they were all dumbfounded. Their eyes were trembling, and they had no idea what was going on. In their hearts, Nye Tian was becoming more and more terrifying. Nye Tian had said that he would kill Black Dragon Yun in one move. Did he really have that strength? Boom. At this moment, Nye Tian didn't speak anymore. His body trembled, and clusters of black talisman symbols surged out from his body. They surged around his body, and he seemed extremely terrifying. His entire body seemed to have instantly become an abyss that emitted extreme coldness and profoundness. This is... Black Dragon Yun's eyes trembled again when he saw this scene. He simply couldn't believe his eyes. Nye Tian was actually using the power of the Dragon Mark Talisman. Nye Tian could also use the Dragon Mark Talisman? You absorbed my Dragon Mark Talisman. In the next moment, Black Dragon Yun immediately reacted and exclaimed. His voice became incomparably sharp and ear-piercing. He had never imagined that the Dragon Mark Talisman he had used to torture Nye Tian would actually be absorbed by the latter. In order to cultivate the Dragon Mark Talisman, Black Dragon Yun had endured who knew how much pain to achieve his current accomplishments. Nye Tian actually grasped the Dragon Mark Forbidden Talisman in the blink of an eye. This is too terrifying. Is this lad a human or a ghost? Yun Xian was dumbfounded as well. He was already at a loss for words. Yun Qing's mouth was wide open, but he couldn't say a single word. What was hidden in Nye Tian's body for him to be able to directly absorb the Dragon Mark Forbidden Talisman? If he hadn't seen it with his own eyes, he would have found it hard to believe that there was such a terrifying person in the world. The power of the Dragon Mark Talisman is pretty good. I can try it on you. Nye Tian smiled faintly. His eyes were filled with extreme contempt. You're courting death. The Black Cloud Dragon was infuriated that its power had been absorbed by someone else and was now being tested on its body. It roared and released all of the dragon inscription talismans around its body. The terrifying talismans circulated in the air, releasing a terrifying power. This time, Black Dragon Yun was going to use all his strength. He had to thoroughly exterminate Nye Tian. If he had known that Nye Tian was so terrifying, Black Dragon Yun definitely wouldn't have used the Dragon Mark Talisman on Nye Tian's body. Unfortunately, it was too late to say anything now. Very good. Nye Tian looked at Black Dragon Yun. There was no fear in his eyes. Instead, there was a strong desire to fight. Die. Black Dragon Yun felt the contempt in Nye Tian's eyes and was instantly enraged. With a roar, all of the power in its body condensed. A 3,000-meter-long black dragon appeared in the air. It roared and its aura shook the heavens. This was Black Dragon Yun's most terrifying attack. It had already used all of its power. Is this all you've got? Facing Black Dragon Yun's all-out attack, the corner of Nye Tian's mouth curled up slightly. His eyes were cold and murderous. His expression was so calm that it made people's hair stand on end. Boom! In an instant, the 9 yuan meridians in Nye Tian's body revolved to the extreme. Then, he slapped out with his palm. A black dragon also appeared in the air. It was actually also condensed from the Dragon Mark Talisman. However, the black dragon that Nye Tian condensed was much smaller than Black Dragon Yun's. Brat, you want to use my power to defeat me? Dream on. Black Dragon Yun sneered when he saw this. He was certain that Nye Tian was no match for him. Is that so? Suddenly Nye Tian sneered. Then, he raised both his hands. 4 streams of black evil power appeared. They were like 4 black snakes. They whizzed out and actually fused with his black dragon. Roar! In an instant, the black dragon roared to the sky. Then, its body doubled in size, and its aura increased by several times. Waves after waves of extremely violent dragon chi were released, filling the air. It was as though the entire world was about to be torn apart. The sudden scene caught Black Dragon Yun off guard. His eyes trembled violently, and he was extremely frightened. He had never imagined that there would be such a terrifying evil power hidden in Nie Tion's body. Boom! In the next moment the two dragons collided. The air exploded violently, and countless dragon-marked talismans were torn apart, wreaking havoc in the air. Chi chi chi! An ear-piercing sound came from the air. The two powers devoured each other, wanting to completely destroy the other. Crack! At this moment, a terrifying explosion sounded. One of the black dragons finally couldn't hold on any longer, and its huge body directly collapsed. Ah! In the next moment, a miserable cry sounded, but it was instantly annihilated. The endless turbid waves gradually became clear. A figure appeared in the night sky. It was Nie Tion. As for the other figure, it had completely disappeared. In the intense battle with Nie Tion, Black Dragon Yun had died on the spot. Everyone looked at the silver-haired figure in the sky. Their eyes flickered with surprise and shock. Who would have thought that Black Dragon Yun had actually died at the hands of Nie Tion? Moreover, he had been killed by Nie Tion using his own dragon-mark talisman. The power of the dragon-mark talisman is indeed terrifying. Nie Tion's figure towered in the air, and his eyes flickered continuously. The power of the dragon-mark talisman had exceeded his expectations. He could feel that after fusing with the talisman, his 9 dragon veins had become even more powerful. Even the power of his bloodline had become stronger. His martial body had also become stronger. The dragon-mark talisman had increased his power in almost every aspect. More importantly, Nie Tion had been able to kill Black Dragon Yun just now because he had used the power of the demons. The power of the 4 demons had fused with the power of the dragon-mark talisman, and an unimaginable power had erupted. The dragon-mark talisman seemed to be very compatible with the power of the demons. When the two powers fused together, it was very frightening. At this time, Nie Tion looked into the void and sensed a strange power surging in the air. It had not dissipated yet. It was the dragon-mark talisman that had dissipated from Black Dragon Yun's body. Without hesitation, he waved his hand and absorbed the power of the dragon-mark talisman. The 9 dragon veins had fused with the dragon-mark talisman, but Nie Tion did not feel any backlash from the talisman. It was as if the talisman had fused with his supreme dragon vein, and the backlash had disappeared. It was very miraculous. Don't tell me it's because of Shue Er's tear? Nie Tion frowned as a strange look appeared in his eyes. He had already sensed that the tear of the princess had fused with his bloodline and seemed to have some kind of effect on it. Moreover, the tear of the princess had released a powerful power at the critical moment to protect Nie Tion. Otherwise, he would not have been able to stand until now. That teardrop, what was it? Nie Tion was puzzled. He knew that it was the tear of the princess that had fused with his bloodline that allowed him to instantly recover his strength. Chapter 1569. The Emperor's Tear. Nie Tion really couldn't understand what it was. However, he could sense that Snow's teardrop was indeed extraordinary. It must contain some sort of secret. The power of a single tear is so great. Nie Tion frowned, his eyes flashing. He sighed in his heart, Cher, just who are you? Cher and the Emperor of the Netherworld had a special relationship. If Cher's power was already so abnormal, then it was hard to imagine just how terrifying the Emperor of the Netherworld was. Yun Xian is gone. At this time, Yun Qing suddenly sensed something and shouted. Nie Tion couldn't help but be surprised. Turning around, he saw that Yun Xian was indeed gone. This old fox is really ruthless, running away just like that. Nie Tion frowned and said gravely. Yun Xian must have escaped while Nie Tion and Black Dragon were fighting. Otherwise, there was no way Nie Tion wouldn't have sensed him. Not even caring for his own son, Yun Xian was truly ruthless. Oh no! Seeing Yun Xian escape, Yun Qing's expression changed and he cried out in alarm. Yun Xian knew how to enter Little Rock Village. Once he left, he would definitely bring back the experts of Green Wolf Bastion for revenge. At that time, Little Rock Village would welcome an even greater calamity. Elder Yun, now that things have come to this, let the villagers go into the Forbidden Grounds to take refuge. As for how to deal with Green Wolf Bastion, we need to slowly discuss it. Nie Tian naturally knew what Yunqing was worried about. His eyes flashed as he spoke indifferently. It was definitely too late to chase after Yunxian now. The most important thing now was to protect the villagers. Yunqing nodded. Now that things had come to this, they could only do this. At this time, almost all of the villagers had entered the Forbidden Grounds. There were only 20 to 30 people left. Moments later, all of the villagers safely entered the Forbidden Grounds. Nie Tian, Chen Wuqing, and the others also entered the Forbidden Grounds. Although the Yun family's rules forbade outsiders from entering the Forbidden Grounds, Yunqing could no longer care about these rules due to the circumstances. If it weren't for Nie Tian and the others, Little Rock Village would have already become a slaughterhouse. Yunqing couldn't let Nie Tian and the others stay outside the forbidden area. How could he know that Nie Tian had long entered the forbidden area? By the time everyone had entered the forbidden area, the passage marked by Fat Cat had disappeared. Yunqing arranged for people to do a head count. There were only about 600 villagers left, and most of them were women and children. There were only a dozen adult men left, and all of them were severely injured. Sigh. When Yunqing learned of the casualties among the villagers, he couldn't help but let out a long sigh. He didn't think that the peaceful Little Rock Village would become like this. Yunxian, oh Yunxian, you shouldn't have done this. Yunqing let out a long sigh and cursed. His already aged face became even more aged. Yunxian had killed his son and colluded with Green Wolf's stronghold, causing so many innocent villagers to suffer. His actions were infuriating. Old bastard Yunxian, I'll kill you with my own hands. At this moment, Yun Tian already knew that his father had died at the hands of Yunxian and his son. The anger in his heart could be imagined, and he hated Yunxian to the core. Elder Yun, now that things have come to this, there's no point in being sad. Next, we need to think about how to deal with Green Wolf's stronghold. Nie Tian took a step forward and looked at Yunqing as he spoke in a deep voice. Yunxian had escaped, and Green Wolf's stronghold would attack Little Rock Village again. Moreover, Yunxian also knew how to enter the forbidden area, so the people of Little Rock Village were still not safe. Mr. Nie, the people of Green Wolf's stronghold are too strong. The people of Little Rock Village alone cannot resist them. Yunqing looked at Nie Tian and was moved. Then, his knees sank to the ground and he begged, Mr. Nie, please save Little Rock Village. Elder Yun, what are you doing? Nie Tian saw Yunqing kneel and hurriedly helped him up. He said in a deep voice, I am also responsible for what happened to Little Rock Village. If I hadn't injured Yunxian and his son, they probably wouldn't have taken such a risk. I will stay and fight with Little Rock Village against the enemy. On behalf of the 600 villagers of Little Rock Village, I thank Mr. Nie. Yunqing bowed deeply, his expression sorrowful and emotional. In reality, he knew that even without Nie Tian, Green Wolf's stronghold would attack sooner or later. Since Yunxian had already contacted Green Wolf's stronghold, then whether or not they could enter Little Rock Village was not something he could decide. Nie Tian faintly smiled and did not say anything more. Wanting to save the villagers of Little Rock Village was not an easy task. Zhao Yongji was only the third boss of Green Wolf's stronghold. This undoubtedly meant that there were two more powerful people in Green Wolf's stronghold. But what worried Nie Tian even more was that if there was another powerful force behind Green Wolf's stronghold, then it would be terrible. Next, Yunqing settled the villagers down in the forbidden area. No one knew when the Green Wolf stronghold's people would appear again. Nie Tian inspected the injuries of Chen Wuqing and the others. Their injuries were very serious. Even though they had taken Yang Zhongqiu's divine pill, it would take at least 10 days to half a month for them to completely recover. Elder Yun, there are some things I must tell you. At this time, Nie Tian came to Yunqing's side and no longer hid anything. He told him everything about his night exploration of the forbidden area and the 9 dragons ley line. After hearing Nie Tian's story, Yunqing was not too surprised, but his expression became a little gloomy. He said in a low voice, "So you are saying that you are here for the 9 dragons ley line?" "Yes." Nie Tian nodded and looked at Yunqing with a burning gaze. "Elder Yun, you also know about the 9 dragons ley line?" When Yunqing heard about the 9 dragons ley line, he was not too surprised. Instead, he was very calm. This made Nie Tian feel very strange. Yunqing nodded and said, "Mr. Nie, to tell you the truth, the Yun family's ancient books have recorded the 9 dragons ley line. The reason why the Yun family settled in Little Rock Village was to protect the 9 dragons ley line. Our Yun family is the guardian family of the 9 dragons ley line." Guardian family of the 9 dragons ley line? Nie Tian's eyes darkened with surprise. In fact, when he first came to Little Rock Village, he had some doubt. The Yun family was not a normal family, and Little Rock Village was not a normal mountain village. There were steep cliffs and ancient killing arrays protecting the village. The villagers' strength was not something a normal mountain villager could compare to. All of these doubts were solved now. So the Yun family was the guardian family of the 9 dragons ley line. Mr. Nie, our Yun family is a family that has existed since the ancient times. Moreover, we once flourished during the ancient times and were one of the few great families of that time. However, for some unknown reason, the Yun family's ancestor led the family to hide from the world and chose to protect the 9 dragons ley line. Yunqing continued to speak. At this point, he sighed and smiled. It's just that after the Yun family's ancestors' generation fell, the strength of the Yun family's cultivators declined with each generation. Until now, it has become like this. So that's how it is. Nie Tian nodded slightly. He did not think that a remote Yun family could be one of the great families in the past. Nie Tian estimated that the Yun family's ancestor lived in an era even older than the Sword Elder and Ni Jiaming. Chapter 1570. The Yun family's forbidden technique, the dragon-inscribed talisman, was extremely terrifying. Nie Tian had almost died to Black Dragon's talisman. If it were not for the fact that he possessed the sovereign dragon's vein, which allowed him to absorb and fuse with the talisman, as well as the fact that the princess's tear had fused with his blood, allowing his strength to recover instantly, it would have been difficult to say who would have won the battle. Black Dragon had said that the Yun family had 3 great forbidden techniques. The dragon-inscribed talisman was only one of them. Since the cultivators of the Yun family were declining with each generation, why didn't they cultivate the 3 great forbidden techniques? Forbidden techniques? Yunqing could not help but smile bitterly when he heard Nie Tian mention the 3 forbidden techniques. He said, "The rules of the Yun family state that the 3 forbidden techniques can only be practiced by cultivators who have reached the level of Overgod. No one else can." "Why?" Nie Tian frowned. He could not help but be stunned. Since they were forbidden techniques, they could not cultivate them at all. Why did they have to wait until they were overgods? Overgods were extremely rare. There were hundreds of billions or even trillions of people in the entire god realm. There were tens of billions of cultivators, but there were definitely less than 100 overgods. The palace masters of the 12 divine palaces were all overgods, but their strength represented the apex of the god realm. This was more than enough to show just how difficult it was to become an overgod. There were only a few thousand people in Little Rock Village, so it was not easy for them to produce an overgod. The 3 great forbidden techniques of the Yun family are indeed terrifying. In the past, the Yun family relied on the 3 great forbidden techniques to become one of the peak clans, Yunqing said sternly. As Yunqing spoke, his expression became serious. However, the backlash from the 3 great forbidden techniques is also very strong. The earlier one cultivates them, the stronger the backlash. Only at the level of a main god can the backlash of a forbidden technique be completely suppressed. However, at that point, even if one cultivates the forbidden techniques, it won't be too powerful. It's precisely because all the cultivators of the Yun family cultivated the forbidden techniques that their lifespans were much shorter than cultivators of the same level. It was even less than a tenth of a regular cultivator's lifespan. The dragon-inscribed talisman that Black Dragon secretly cultivated is the weakest of the three great forbidden techniques of the Yun family. The other two are even more terrifying, and the backlash is even more powerful. When the Black Cloud Dragon activated the Dragon Mark Talisman, the backlash was already strong enough. At that time, even if he didn't die in your hands, I'm afraid he would have been tortured to death by the backlash. At this point, Yun Qing involuntarily shook his head and bitterly laughed. The three great forbidden techniques have already become a taboo within the Yun clan. If not for the appearance of Black Dragon Yun, I'm afraid that the members of the Yun clan would have already forgotten about the three great forbidden techniques. The power of the forbidden technique is so strong. Nie Tian frowned and his eyes flickered. Mr. Nie. At this time, Yun Qing also thought of something and suddenly asked, when you absorbed the Black Cloud Dragon's dragon inscription talisman, do you feel anything strange now? No. Nie Tian shook his head and said with a smile, I feel that my strength has increased and my Yuan meridian has become much stronger. The dragon inscription talisman doesn't seem to have any backlash on me. How strange. Yun Qing was stunned and looked at Nie Tian in disbelief. In fact, he simply couldn't understand how Nie Tian could directly absorb the dragon inscription talisman. This was too strange. Elder Yun, you know about the three great forbidden techniques of the Yun clan, right? Nie Tian's gaze shifted as he suddenly asked. This old man knows. Yun Qing nodded and said, the three great forbidden techniques have always been kept by the village chief. However, the forbidden technique scrolls have been sealed and can't be opened. Nie Tian frowned and immediately asked, where did Black Dragon Yun obtain the forbidden technique? It should be some ancient books. Yun Qing let out a long sigh. Suddenly, his face darkened as he looked at Nie Tian with a burning gaze, as if he was thinking about something. Elder Yun, are you all right? Nie Tian couldn't help but frown and ask in astonishment when he saw Yun Qing's strange expression. Yun Qing's eyes flickered and three scrolls suddenly appeared in his hand. He handed them over to Nie Tian and said, Mr. Nie, these are the scrolls of the three great forbidden techniques of the Yun clan. This old man can no longer keep them. Please take care of them for me. If Little Stone Village is unfortunately destroyed, please destroy the three great forbidden techniques. Yun Qing's expression changed. In his heart, he had already prepared for the worst. Elder Yun, what are you? Nie Tian was dazed for a moment. He used his divine sense to sense Yun Qing's body and actually felt a strange power flowing in the latter's body. Nie Tian couldn't help but frown and couldn't help but carefully sense it. He actually felt that the strange power was nibbling away at Yun Qing's blood and qi. Elder Yun, what kind of power is in your body? Nie Tian suddenly felt that something was wrong and his brows suddenly furrowed. I. Yun Qing knew that Nie Tian already knew, so his face turned red. He was actually a bit embarrassed to say it. Elder Yun, could it be that you also? Nie Tian immediately understood. His expression suddenly changed and he said in a low voice, you also practiced the forbidden technique. Yun Qing was directly exposed by Nie Tian, so he didn't hide it anymore. He solemnly nodded and said, when I was young, in order to compete for the village chief's position, I tried every possible way to improve my strength. Finally, in an ancient book, I found a record of the forbidden technique, the forbidden dragon's bloodline. In order to improve my strength, I practiced the forbidden dragon's bloodline. In the end, my strength improved, but there was a forbidden dragon's power in my bloodline, constantly nibbling away at my blood and qi. I know that I don't have much time left. I also feel ashamed for what I did in the past, but it's all too late. The forbidden dragon's power is too strong. I can't hold on for much longer." Yunqing knew that he didn't have much time left. His eyes revealed not fear, but calmness. Nie Tian lightly sighed. He wasn't a member of the Yun family, so he didn't have the right to criticize Yunqing. "Elder Yun, since you have the 3 forbidden technique scrolls in your hands, why don't you open them? Perhaps there is a way to suppress the forbidden dragon's power inside?" Nie Tian became cold and asked doubtfully. Yunqing bitterly laughed and said, "The forbidden technique scrolls are sealed by the ancestors of the Yun family, no one can open them." Nie Tian was stunned. "So it's like this." No wonder Yunqing was so at ease to hand over the forbidden technique scrolls to me. "Seal?" Right at this time, Fat Cat's weird voice sounded in Nie Tian's mind. It actually had a bit of ridicule in it, and it said with a mischievous tone, "In this world, there is no seal that this deity can't open." Hearing Fat Cat's words, Nie Tian's gaze couldn't help but tremble. He happily said, "Fat, you can open the seal of the forbidden technique scrolls?" "Of course." Fat Cat laughed and said very arrogantly, "As long as it isn't a seal left behind by a saint, this deity can open it." Nie Tian was stunned. His eyes trembled, and he couldn't help but swallow his saliva. "I didn't expect Fat Cat to be so powerful. Formations, seals, wards, there was almost nothing that Fat Cat couldn't do. This Fat Cat is really terrifying. Its only weakness is that it doesn't have any combat power, and it only has 2 tails. When Fat Cat grows out 9 tails, its combat power will probably become very shocking. Mr. Nie, I'll leave the forbidden technique scrolls to you, please." Yunqing naturally didn't know about the conversation between Nie Tian and Fat Cat. Instead, he looked at Nie Tian with a sincere face and thanked him deeply. "You're welcome." Nie Tian smiled faintly and kept the forbidden technique scrolls. A strange smile hung on the corner of his mouth. 3 forbidden techniques, one more powerful than the other. Nie Tian really wanted to see how powerful the other 2 forbidden techniques were. If possible, he wanted to cultivate the 3 forbidden techniques. Chapter 1571. Nie Tian put away the forbidden technique scroll, and a hint of excitement flashed in his eyes. He could feel that the dragon mark forbidden talisman had greatly improved him. His strength had become stronger, his 9 dragon veins had become stronger, and even his martial body had become stronger. More importantly, Nie Tian could feel that the dragon mark talisman was still growing stronger. As long as he activated the talisman, his strength would increase temporarily. When Yun Heilong activated the dragon mark seal, his strength skyrocketed from the peak of the mid-god stage to the mid-stage of the high-god stage. Nie Tian, of course, knew that this increase in strength was temporary, similar to the Yuan burst pill. Once the dragon mark seal returned to the Yuan meridian, his strength would return. However, the existence of the dragon mark seal was equivalent to Nie Tian having the Yuan burst pill at any time. "Mr. Nie, this old man will go check on the villagers first," Yunqing said and turned to leave. Nie Tian nodded with a smile, then went to a secluded valley. He wanted to thoroughly check what changes the dragon mark seal and the tear of the princess had brought to his body. Phew! In the valley, Nie Tian let out a long breath and began to look inside his body. The dragon mark seal turned into circles of runes and imprinted on the 9 dragon veins. It was a very strange scene. Nie Tian carefully felt the dragon mark seal. In the next moment, he discovered something and his eyes couldn't help but tremble. He said in astonishment, "The dragon mark seal is actually fusing with the dragon vein seal." At this moment, Nie Tian suddenly felt that the dragon mark seal was actually slowly fusing with the dragon vein seal, as though it was breaking the seal bit by bit. Nie Tian's mouth was wide open. He was so shocked that he couldn't speak. "Nie Tian, your dragon vein seal was formed by absorbing a huge amount of dragon qi, right?" Fat Cat's figure suddenly appeared. She frowned and asked curiously. Yes, Nye Tian nodded and asked, is there a problem? His dragon vein seal was formed when he first entered the forbidden land of wind and cloud and absorbed the dragon chi of a golden dragon in the dragon coffin on the cliff wall. Later on, the dragon vein seal could be opened under certain circumstances. However, most of the time, the dragon vein seal was in a closed state and Nye Tian could not use the dragon chi within the seal. No problem. The fat cat let out a strange laugh and said, according to my observation, the dragon mark forbidden talisman is an extremely rare divine power. It can stimulate a martial artist's bloodline power and improve their martial body. The dragon inscription talisman and the dragon vein sealing sword seem to have some sort of fusion. When the dragon inscription talisman unseals the dragon vein seal, it is also slowly absorbing the power of the dragon vein seal. Impossible! When Nye Tian heard this, he couldn't help but let out a strange cry. Nye Tian knew very well how powerful the dragon vein seal was. When he broke free of his sealing mark, he was as strong as a peak paramount god. The forbidden dragon rune talisman was just some strange talisman. How could it absorb the power of the dragon vein seal? Why is it impossible? The fat cat laughed and said, don't underestimate the dragon rune talisman. Its power is very strange. Even I can't see through it. The Yun clan's ancestor lived in the early Archean era millions of years ago. Back then, there were many experts. The Yun clan's ancestor relied on the three great forbidden arts to make the Yun clan a superfamily in the early Archean era. However, everything in this world has its pros and cons. The extremely powerful forbidden arts must have a huge side effect. The Yun clan's ancestor must have realized something when he cultivated the three great forbidden arts. That's why he led the Yun clan's people to live in seclusion and forbade them from cultivating the forbidden arts. Nye Tian frowned and couldn't help but wonder, since the three great forbidden arts have such a strong backlash, why don't I feel anything after absorbing the dragon rune talisman? Nye Tian, you're in luck. The fat cat chuckled and said, I've already checked your body. The backlash from the dragon rune talisman doesn't exist. I'm guessing that Cher's tear must have fused with your blood and caused a strange change in your martial body, allowing you to completely ignore the backlash from the dragon rune talisman. It really is Cher's tear. Nye Tian's eyes slightly trembled and he immediately asked, Fat, do you know what that tear is? The fat cat's huge eyes slightly froze. It hesitated for a moment, but it still said four words, the princess's tear. The princess's tear? Nye Tian was stunned. He didn't know what the princess's tear represented. Nye Tian, I know very little about the princess's tear. If you want to know what it is, you can only rely on yourself. The fat cat smiled and said, however, the princess's tear is very powerful and won't have any side effects on you. Perhaps the evil energy in your blood will also change because of the princess's tear. Nye Tian frowned and remained silent for a while. The princess's tear was indeed an extraordinary thing. It was really terrifying. Nye Tian, the princess's tear is one of the three great legends of the ancient Ming tribe. The fat cat looked at Nye Tian and sighed in its heart. Rumor has it that the person who activates the princess's tear will change the fate of the ancient Ming tribe. Will you be the man of destiny? Nye Tian didn't know what the fat cat was thinking. After a moment of silence, he suddenly asked, Fat, what will happen when the dragon rune talisman absorbs the power of the dragon vein seal? With the power of the dragon mark forbidden talisman, the final result is very likely that the dragon mark forbidden talisman will completely absorb the dragon vein seal, and its power will reach its peak. Little fat cat chuckled and said proudly, If that's the case, then the dragon rune talisman is even more powerful than the dragon vein seal? Nye Tian was stunned. The shock in his heart was written all over his face. The dragon rune talisman's power far exceeded his expectations. Yes. The fat cat nodded and said, If the Dragon Rune Talisman reaches its peak and is activated, even if you are in the Paramount God realm, your battle prowess will increase by leaps and bounds with the help of the talisman. As long as you can reach the peak of the Paramount God realm and activate the Dragon Rune Talisman, you will be able to fight 9 God Calamity, who is in the half-step Saint realm. That's terrifying. Nye Tion's eyes trembled and he gulped. The fat cat had said before that even an expert like Nye Dao couldn't withstand the pressure of a half-step Saint Calamity. The Dragon Rune Talisman was so powerful. Nye Tion, you can't overuse the Dragon Rune Talisman. The fat cat reminded Nye Tion at this time. Every time you use the Dragon Rune Talisman, the talisman itself will enter a period of weakness. This will greatly slow down the Dragon Rune Talisman's absorption of the Dragon Vein Seal, and it will also harm your martial body. Yes. Nye Tion nodded. He wouldn't use the Dragon Rune Talisman unless he was in a critical situation. Fat, let's take a look at these 3 Forbidden Technique scrolls. Nye Tion suddenly became excited. He took out 3 Forbidden Technique scrolls and placed them in front of the fat cat. Chapter 1572. Fat, take a look. Is it possible to break the seal on the scroll? Nye Tion placed the scroll in front of the fat cat and said excitedly. The fat cat nodded. It moved its body and released a gust of colored glaze chi. The colored glaze chi started to examine the scroll. The fat cat seemed to have sensed something and fell into deep thought. Fat, how is it? Nye Tion frowned when he saw the fat cat's reaction. He looked worried. The fat cat had boasted a lot before, but its reaction wasn't very good. The seal on the scroll is very strong. Even after millions of years, the seal hasn't weakened at all. The fat cat calmed down and laughed. However, this seal isn't a problem for me. I just need some time to break it. How long? Nye Tion was stunned. His eyes lit up. If breaking the seal required tens or hundreds of years, then it would be meaningless. A month at the slowest, half a month at the fastest. The fat cat nodded slightly and smiled. That's good. Nye Tion let out a long sigh. He could afford to wait for half a month. Someone's coming. I'll leave first. At this time, little fat cat let out a weird laugh, and with a flash, it disappeared with the 3 forbidden scrolls. Nye Tion was stunned for a moment. Then, he immediately realized that the forbidden magic scroll was actually a living thing. Mr. Nye. Right after the fat cat disappeared, Yun Qing's voice came from outside the valley. Elder Yun. Seeing Yun Qing walk over, Nye Tion smiled and asked, "Is there anything I can help you with?" Yun Qing bowed slightly and said respectfully, "Mr. Nye, several of your friends are seriously injured. I'd like to help them recover." How? Nye Tion was stunned. He immediately thought of something and said, 9 leaves Bodhi. And Yun Qing knew that Nye Tion had seen the 9-leaf Bodhi fruit before, so he wasn't surprised. He said, "The 9-leaf Bodhi fruit grows from absorbing the Mother Earth essence energy from the 9 dragon earth veins. The 9-leaf Bodhi fruit contains powerful Mother Earth essence energy. As long as your friend consumes the 9-leaf Bodhi fruit, he will be able to recover very quickly. His strength might even increase." "Thank you, Elder Yun." Nye Tion nodded heavily, his eyes blazing. Chen Wuqing and the rest were severely injured. If they were to only take divine pills, they would need at least half a month to fully recover. However, with the 9-leaf Bodhi fruit, he would be able to recover quickly. Nye Tion and Yun Qing didn't waste any time. They went straight to the entrance of the earth vein. The 9-leaf Bodhi tree. Arriving at the entrance of the abyss once more, Nye Tion gazed at the massive tree floating in front of him. Sensing the immense power emanating from it, he was deeply moved. The 9-leaf Bodhi had only absorbed the energy from the 9 dragons' earth vein, yet it was already so powerful. It was hard to imagine what kind of terrifying energy the 9 dragons' earth vein contained. "Mr. Nye, please wait a moment." Yun Qing faintly smiled. With a flicker of his silhouette, he flew towards the 9-leaf Bodhi tree. After plucking several 9-leaf Bodhi fruits, he returned. Nie Tian, who was watching from the side, was stunned. He didn't expect it to be so easy. If he had known earlier, he would have plucked a few 9-leaf Bodhi fruits before coming here. Subsequently, Nie Tian and Yun Qing returned to where the others were. Chen Wuqing, Yang Zhongqiu, Nieqiu, Ed, and the rest each consumed a 9-leaf Bodhi fruit. Their strengths quickly recovered. Nie Tian also consumed a 9-leaf Bodhi fruit. He could feel the blood and qi in his body surging. His strength had increased slightly. He seemed to be showing signs of breaking through again. Nie Tian had only advanced to early stage mid-god a few days ago. However, after absorbing the energy from the Dragon Mark talisman, fusing with the tear of the princess, and consuming the 9-leaf Bodhi fruit, his strength had reached the peak of early stage mid-god. He was showing signs of breaking through again. After Chen Wuqing consumed the 9-leaf Bodhi fruit, he really did break through. His strength reached the mid-stage mid-god level. Nie Qiu's strength also rose to the peak of low-stage mid-god level. Ed and Yang Zhongqiu, on the other hand, still maintained their original strength. The 9-leaf Bodhi fruit contained powerful Mother Earth Yuan energy. It was a kind of extremely pure life force. Everyone's injuries were instantly healed. The next day, everything was very peaceful. The people of Green Wolf Bastion did not appear. However, everyone was very agitated. At this moment, they were like a group of piglets waiting for the people of Green Wolf Bastion to come. Yun Qing settled the villagers of Little Rock Village in a remote valley, far away from the entrance of the Earth Vein. Nie Tian didn't know when the people of Green Wolf Bastion would arrive. He had the idea of probing the entrance of the Earth Vein. He went to find Yun Qing and told her about his thoughts. Mr. Nie, are you really going to enter the 9 Dragons' Earth Vein? Yun Qing frowned. He knew that the reason Nie Tian came to Little Rock Village was for the 9 Dragons' Earth Vein. As the guardian family of the 9 Dragons' Earth Vein, Yun family really didn't want to see this happen. But the Yun family could barely protect themselves now, let alone the 9 Dragons' Earth Vein. If the 9 Dragons' Earth Vein was exposed, Yun Qing hoped that Nie Tian would enter it. It was better than being snatched away by the people of Green Wolf Bastion. Yes. Nie Tian nodded slightly. I'm going to check the Earth Vein first. Maybe there's a better hiding place down there. The villagers of Little Rock Village can hide there. All right. Yun Qing nodded. He knew that he couldn't stop Nie Tian, so he could only agree. After a while, Nie Tian and the rest arrived at the entrance of the Earth Vein. It was the first time Chen Wuqing and the rest had seen such a magical scene. Their eyes couldn't help but tremble. Their expressions became dull. This is the entrance of the 9 Dragons' Earth Vein. Nie Tian smiled faintly. He looked at the bottom of the abyss. It was a bottomless darkness. Who knew what was hidden there? Nie Tian, are we going to enter the Earth Vein? Chen Wuqing looked at Nie Tian, unable to conceal the passion in his eyes. Chen Wuqing, let's go in and check it out first. Nie Tian nodded slightly. He and Chen Wuqing were the strongest, so they would go in first. I want to go too. At this moment, Yun Tian stepped forward and said stubbornly. Yun Tian, don't mess around. Yun Qing glared at Yun Tian. Entering the Earth Vein was no joke. One careless move and they would lose their lives. I'm not messing around. Unexpectedly, Yun Tian was very determined this time. He had to enter the Earth Vein. Elder Yun, let Yun Tian come with me. Nie Tian smiled. Bringing Yun Tian along was not a bad idea. After all, the latter was a martial artist who absorbed Mother Earth essence energy all year round. Yun Qing looked at Nie Tian and nodded deeply. Nie Tian naturally understood what Yun Qing meant. He nodded with a smile. He would protect Yun Tian well. Immediately, Nie Tian hesitated no more. He took a step forward and entered the sky above the abyss. The instant he entered the sky above the abyss, Nie Tian felt the vast Mother Earth essence energy surging over. all the pores on his body opened up. He was like dry ground, absorbing the Mother Earth essence energy crazily.